What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto finds Orochimaru is? If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments, and also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. Night fall, little stars and no moon in sight. Slender winds rustled the leaves and shook the tree branches, making frail contact with the side of a yellow and red brick house. 3 upstairs windows, one in the bathroom, which you could see first glance at the house. If you went to the side of the establishment you could see a baby's crib about 3 feet away from the window, and across the hall from the baby's room was his parents' room. The little night light plugged into the wall was on as the parents lingered in the baby's room, tucking him in and kissing him goodnight. The male wrapped his arm around his wife's waist, bringing her closer, and sighed good-heartedly. "Kushina," he said, "we're going to raise Naruto right. Give him everything he wants and needs." Baby Naruto perked up, escaped his mother's tucking and waved his little arms in the air yelling his baby nonsense. "That's right Yondaime," she said softly, pulling the cover over Naruto's body. Both his parents stayed until they knew he was asleep. "Good night sweetie," she said and walked over to the door. "See you tomorrow champ." They were both at the door when they said, "Love you," and gently closed the door. As soon as they left the room, a darkened figure was illuminated when he was close enough to the window by the night light plugged into the wall with a large grin, looking at the baby's crib, and licked his top lip. He brought with him what seemed to be a black switchblade. He slowly shoved the knife in the side of the window, but hard enough so the blade could go through the slit. He then jerked it around a bit until he heard a clank. Then he grabbed the window from the bottom when he knew it was unlocked, and slowly pulled it up. It made a meager sound when it was rubbed against the sides of the windowsill. The man hopped off the tree branch and into the window, another large grin present at his success as he walked over to Naruto's crib. "Hello Naruto," his voice dragging, as if in slow motion. "My name's Orochimaru, your new guardian. And soon you'll be calling me Papa," he said and chuckled evilly. "He picks the baby up." Naruto yawned, and his eyes blinked open. And when he could see, those little innocent sapphire blue eyes met cold, dark, venomous serpent ones, and a grin. They both just stood there, staring at each other, Naruto becoming uneasy about someone he never saw in his 6 months of childhood. Babyhood. When Orochimaru attempted to speak out, Naruto had already begun crying. The sound waves from his cries bounced from wall to wall until it rang through his father's ears. Yondaime rose from the bed sleepily, not detecting any signs of a kidnapper, who in such remained quiet to not alert his parents of a kidnapper. Yondaime dragged himself along slowly, dragging his feet on the carpet, eyes barely open, thinking it was just another one of those midnight things when babies cry for food or something. Orochimaru boldly and calmly walked over to Naruto's toy bin, swiped up a few toys, and hurried out the window when he seen a shadow appear on the door by the night light. He jumped down the tree and scurried down the street. Yondaime thought he was losing his mind. The cry sounded like it was getting further away as he got closer to the room. He flicked the light switch and yawned, and walked lazily over to the crib. He looked down and, "What the?" he said. "Where are you? You didn't climb out your crib, did you?" he asked open-mindedly, looking around the room, on the floor, and even the ceiling, but he didn't find him anywhere. "Naruto," he called. "Naruto, where are you?" By this time Kushina entered the room, rubbing the sleep out her eyes with the back of her hand. "What's wrong?" she asked, and then yawned. "Naruto's gone," he said frantically. "What?" she questioned. "Naruto is gone," he repeated, checking the room again. "How could he be gone? He can't even walk yet," she stated, accompanying him on his search for the lost Naruto. "Naruto, Naruto, where are you?" she called and turned, noticing the window was up, and froze. "Yondaime," she called calmly. "You didn't leave the window open, did you?" "No, he stopped himself as realization hit. "Somebody stole my baby," she yelled and ran for the phone. She punched in the number 911, and waited as a lady answered the phone. "Anbu, what is your emergency?" A light rainstorm showered down upon Naruto and his kidnapper. Orochimaru ran as far as he could until he reached a metal fence. He pushed Naruto under the hole he made, the toys he stole, and then he slithered under the opening himself, and into the outskirts of Konoha. Naruto still cried, as he dashed through the trees. He made it far enough so Naruto's screams couldn't be heard, stopped, and looked down. You cry a lot, don't you? He asked softly. No worries, I'll break you of that bad habit, he said, and gave a sideways smile. Then looked behind him. That's not good. He dropped the toys and leaned his back against a tree, and slid down. SSH, he prompted, rocking Naruto until he fell back to sleep. Then when Naruto had stopped crying and the little drizzle of rain had stopped, he registered the opportunity to move. He rose to his feet, grabbed the boy's toys, and slowly walked into the distance. ANBU members made the trip across town, and now settled in on a nice comfortable sofa. One was asking the questions, and the others were investigating the residence. When did you say your boy was kidnapped? The ANBU detective asked, feet placed firmly on the wooden floor with a notepad and pen at hand, staring at Yondaime and Kushina on the sofa across from him. It had to be around 3 o'clock, 3:05 or something. Yondaime answered with a hand around his wife's shoulder as she cried into his side, obviously in no condition to answer any type of questions. The detective looked at his watch, which read, 3:32. What does that matter, just go out and find my son. Were there any strange activities happening between this time? Did you hear or see anything at all? The man asked, completely ignoring Yondaime's request, and darted his eyes back and forth between the two of them. He was crying like he always does. I woke up, went to his room and he was gone. Yondaime explained. I didn't hear or see anyone. The window was opened, Kushina muffled in his side, trying to fight back her sobs. Yes, Yondaime continued. The window was open when we went in his room, he said and squeezed his wife tighter as her cries became more violent and loud. The detective looked at her while he asked, are you sure you didn't leave the window up? What has that to do with anything? Yondaime asked. Even if the window was up when we left the room, he couldn't possibly have gotten to it. He can't even walk yet, let alone tall enough to reach it. Are you sure you didn't leave the window up? He repeated. Yondaime narrowed his eyes at the man for such an irrelevant question. Yes, I'm sure, answered Yondaime angrily. One of the other ANBU members came from down the stairs and walked next to the detective. We can't seem to find anything, hair, fingerprint, nothing at all for a DNA sample. The officer said. I see. Did you check every inch of the house? Asked the detective. Yes, sir. The detective picked himself up from the couch and looked down at the grieving parents. If we find anything, we'll let you know. And if you discover anything yourselves, call us immediately, and ask for Detective Kamaru. He said, walked by his officer and stopped. Keep an eye on the parents. I'm not as so much buying their alibi, the detective whispered, and commenced his walk when his comrade provided a nod of assurance. Wait, Kushina yelled. Everyone stopped. Here, take this. She leaned over and gave the detective a picture of Naruto from her gown's pocket. Yes, I feel this would be of some use, thank you. Then he walked out. When baby Naruto awoke the next morning, he found himself on a bed enclosed within 4 white walls, a big wooden oak dresser, a small TV, and the 3 toys Orochimaru swiped from his toy bin. Naruto examined the place for a bit and then realized he was hungry. Like any other baby, he cried, and cried, and cried, until finally Orochimaru came bursting through the door. He had with him a silver platter underneath a bowl. He walked over to him, sat down, picked Naruto up, and tried feeding him. Naruto put the food in his mouth, tasted it, and spat it out. Then resumed crying again. Why'd you just spit it out if you were hungry? Orochimaru inquired to the crying baby. What baby doesn't eat smashed peas? Spoiled brat wants to live in luxury. I brought the sliver platter, what more do you want? Naruto kept crying. Apparently you aren't hungry. Otherwise you would have opened your mouth and told me what you wanted. Orochimaru smirked. Then he tried again, but there was no change in results. Fine, you don't want to eat. Cry yourself to sleep then, he said, threw Naruto on the bed, and stormed out holding his ears, leaving the food. Orochimaru went in his room and slammed the door. He grabbed the remote, clicked the button, and watched as the TV blinked to life. Naruto cried louder, and Orochimaru turned up the volume, but the cries grew louder and louder each second. Shut up, Orochimaru yelled as he pounded on the wall. Damn it, what do you want? He asked himself. He thought about it a minute, which was hard to do while trying to block Naruto out. Then he finally came up with something. Babies eat from those damn bottles, don't they? Orochimaru dropped the remote on the floor, ran down the stairs, into the kitchen, and opened the cabinet, which revealed 3 rows of bottles with children's name on them. Snatching the one that read, Naruto's, and he hurriedly ran back up the stairs, bursted through the door again, and emptied the bowl into the bottle, and gave it to the boy, who stopped crying, and reached for it with unsteady fingers. Naruto had it in his shaking hands, laid back and put the in his mouth. Damn baby. That morning, Detective Kamaru and one of his fellow officers approached Naruto's house, knocked on the door, and waited as the door flung open. And there stood Yondaime, with the most disgusted look on his face. Instead of sadness and sorrow, he showed anger and infuriation. Did you find Naruto? Yondaime asked, with as much kindness he could muster up. No, my officer and I came by today to be aware if you noticed anything in the area amiss. His officer was no more than 23, 24 perhaps. We haven't found anything, and if you didn't find my son, don't bother me with such nonsense. Yondaime said, animosity lacing his words. Sir, the commanding officer began in a nice and gentle tone. Please understand we're going to do all that we can go get your son back to you safely, but It doesn't look like you're doing a damn thing, Yondaime yelled, interrupting the man. You're wasting my time sitting here babbling on about nothing. Kamaru stepped in. Sir, please, if we're going to have any luck capturing your son's kidnapper, we're going to need you to cooperate with us. He then brought out his notepad and pen. Now are you 100% positive you didn't see anything? Yes, damn it. How many more times do I need to tell you until you get it through your head? Yondaime's face went beyond disgusted. He had the expression of death. The young officer sighed. You have to listen and pay attention to any orders we give you. Otherwise there will be little hope for your son's return, and even more, his survival. Yondaime cooled down a little before kindly informing them of some very useful information. Wait, Yondaime said. That night, when I was walking to Naruto's room to check up on him, it did sound like his cries were getting further away. Can you recall in which directions were your boy's cries heard? Kamaru asked. It sounded like it was coming from down the street. Yondaime informed as Kamaru quickly jotted the notes in his pad. We'll take a look, and if you can think of anything else that could be of some useful information, just contact us. Ask for Officer Yun if I'm not available at the time. Yondaime nodded. Right, let's go. As the 2 men walked down the street, they searched for any signs that could give them guidance on this investigation. Are the parents still suspects? Yun asked. It doesn't seem like he'd hurt his own son. He portrays the image of loving him very much. Do you hear yourself when you talk? It doesn't seem he portrays. Anyone can seem like something they're not, simple to do. Example, Halloween, ghost and ghouls. Next day, average people. And anyone can portray a different attitude around different people. So don't be swayed by such obvious distinctions. Kamaru said in a pale manner. Yun felt devastated. Here he was trying to convince his captain of Yondaime's loving behavior, and Kamaru turns it around in his face like it was the simplest observation in the world. They finally made it to the end of the street. Well, we didn't find anything the entire way down here. Yun exclaimed sadly. We had to get more clues, don't we, Captain? Yun called. Captain, did you hear me? Kamaru was staring at the fence with intensity. He was in his own world. He was in his head, thinking. This is quaint. How could we have come this far and found nothing? Kamaru asked himself. No, there's something here, I can feel it. He examined it more thoroughly. He pushed at it, pulled it, until he seen the bottom. The grass growing on the concrete around the fence seemed to have been moved, as well as specks of dirt scattered on the ground. That dirt only surrounds this one patch of grass. Kamaru thought to himself. He bent down and pulled the grass, surprised it came up with such ease. And was faced with a hole going under the fence. What is it? Yun asked dumbfounded. This here was the kidnapper's escape route. But what I'm wondering is, are we dealing with a child or an adult kidnapper? There is no way a normal-sized human being could fit through this. Maybe whoever it is really skinny, Yun suggested. Yes, maybe. Nonetheless, we're going to check this out. Naruto was fast asleep. Orochimaru finally had a chance to lay back and relax. He went to his room, grabbed the remote from the floor, and jumped on the bed. And as soon as he was comfortable, "Wah!" Naruto cried, and Orochimaru winced. You little fuck. Kamaru and Yun made it to the outskirts of Konoha, and into the forestry area where Orochimaru made his escape. Kamaru calculated the light shower that happened last night, and was beheld with some very interesting results. Sir, what are we looking for exactly? Yun asked. Look, Kamaru pointed about 10 feet ahead. There were footprints embedded within the soil. If we follow this, perhaps we can have some kind of lead as to where Naruto has been taken. Yeah, good idea, Captain. Yun yelled proudly. They followed the trail for as long as it could have taken them. That wasn't far. They came to a halt when the tracks ended about 30 yards in the forest. That's it? Yun inquired. They must have known they were leaving a trail. Kamaru concluded, and glanced at another print in the ground. Far from the size of a foot, but of a body. Yes, they had to have had stopped here, waited until the slight rains from last night passed over, and continued on. Clever. Or they used this path as a distraction to elude us away from their actually escape route. Yeah, that could be it, couldn't it? Yun said with uncertainties. No, this had to be their route. But the trail ends here. Where could they have possibly gone? Did you not hear me the first time? They waited for the rain to clear so they wouldn't leave tracks behind. They must have noticed. Kamaru explained for the second time. Yun, he called. 100 yards from this point, what location do you think I'd stumble upon? If my guess is correct, it would be the Sound Village. I see. Then that's my next destination. Kamaru said. Yun clutched his arm and pulled him back. You mean our next destination? Not this time. Stay back and alert me if anything goes wrong, or the parents find anything. Got it? Kamaru asked firmly. Yun released his arm. I understand, the officer said sadly. Just hurry and find him, okay? Kamaru nodded. Of course. Detective Kamaru walked about 45 minutes with no sign of Sound Village in sight. He pushed his way through the bushes that obscured his vision to the undergrowth, resulting in him almost tripping and falling on his face. As he walked further into the forestry region, vines seemed to be coiling around the bark and branches of trees. Now about 1 o'clock, maybe 2 o'clock, the sun's rays intensified, and as he struggled his way through the vines, bushes, pendulum branches, and undergrowth, one foot caught a root protruding from the ground, and he stumbled from the forestry area, and into where a lake of water sparkled from the fluorescent illuminating glow of the sun. His staggering was put on hold as he caught his balance. Sweat developed on his forehead, and rolled down the side of his face. His breathing was heavy, and he nearly felt like passing out, and he collapsed onto the ground. It felt like he was in the desert, it was so hot. While on the ground he looked forward at what seems to be a blur of giant buildings and houses. He perceived it to be Sound Village. How am I supposed to get there? He turned his head over to the right. A little gray brick bridge, with rocky shapes, was about 9 or 10 meters away. Oh, damn, I'm tired. He forced his arms in push-up form, and reluctantly rose from off the ground. He wiped the sweat from off his caramel-complexioned forehead with the back of his hand. His black shoulder-length hair that's supposed to be stiff and in place loosely down the side of his face from his sweaty moisturized scalp. And his long black trench coat didn't make it any better. He stood to his feet and gradually dusted the dirt off his black pants and shirt. He staggered irksomely across to the bridge, and it looked as though the buildings and houses were becoming clearer to his vision. He made it across the bridge, and settled down on a black metal railed bench about 20 meters in the village, that was placed in front of a little playground, and directly across a medium-sized gray and black house. He tried catching his breath by fanning himself with his badge. Who would have thought? I was this, out of shape. In Naruto's room, Orochimaru had Naruto, who was still crying, lying in his arms, swinging him back and forth. SSSH. Orochimaru said to quiet him. He walked in circles. Of all the babies in that damn village, I had to grab you. Orochimaru said, which made Naruto cry louder. Shut up. Orochimaru rushed out the room with Naruto at hand. He went down the stairs, past the living room, and into the kitchen. He shuffled through a few drawers until he finally came across the one filled with pacifiers. Each pacifier had a child's name etched into the base. He grabbed Naruto's and popped it into his mouth. Naruto sucked the lily-eyed. Orochimaru let out a sigh of relief as he got himself a glass of water. Holding Naruto, Orochimaru walked into the hallway and across from the kitchen the living room. He sat on the beige couch to the far left posted against the wall, rocking the boy, and put his water on a small glass table. There was another couch across from him, and a recliner chair in the upper right corner, with a fireplace behind it. 2 glass windows, each on the right side, and a big silver plasma screen TV in the upper left corner. Orochimaru stared out the window in a daze. Then he looked down at Naruto, who was half asleep, and back out the window. That's when he noticed the man sitting on the metal bench, fanning himself with a golden badge. He immediately tensed. Is that? He couldn't complete his sentence from the shock of it all. How'd they find me so fast? Orochimaru stared at the figure, as he lifted and stood onto his feet. His yellow snake eyes traced his every movement. The man with the badge seemed to be looking around, trying to figure out where will he begin his search. That's when Orochimaru and the mont's eyes met through the glass window. His stern black orbs intimidated him. Next thing he knew, the man was walking towards his house through the walkway. Orochimaru hopped from the couch, ran in the hallway, made a right turn facing the staircase, ran past the staircase, and stopped in front of a wooden door across from the bathroom. He opened the door, and the doorbell rang. "I'll be there in a minute." Orochimaru's eyes widened at his shrill voice. Was he really that scared? He hurried down the basement stairs without turning on the light. The 4 little windows in each corner were enough, given that it was still morning light flooded the basement. A light reflected off the spotless washing machine, and beamed onto a wooden oak door, but now it was beaming on Orochimaru's back, as the door was viciously jerked open. He lied Naruto on the cold basement floor. Don't say a word. Understand? He shut the door and ran back up the stairs. Orochimaru straightened himself out and cleared his throat, to avoid another girlish shrill in voice, before he opened the door. "Hello," Orochimaru uttered politely. "May I help you?" Yes, you can." Kamaru answered. "I'm Detective Kamaru of the Anbu agency from the Leaf Village." He showed him his badge, and it just so happens a terrible incident has occurred. "What kind of incident?" Orochimaru asked, fixed with a bewildered look. "There seems that an infant by the name of Naruto Uzumaki has been kidnapped, and I have reason to believe that this criminal just may be lurking your village's streets." "Oh my," Orochimaru said, widening his eyes. "That's just terrible. If I see anything I'll call, okay?" He hurriedly tried shutting the door, but a foot in a leather black shoe stepped in the doorway. Orochimaru looked at the foot for about 3 seconds before returning his gaze to Kamaru. He then slowly opened the door. "You mind if I come in?" Orochimaru hesitated. "This son of a bitch," he growled to himself. "Oh no. Please do come in." He held the door open and watched as Kamaru entered and immediately looked around suspiciously. Then Orochimaru closed the door and headed into the living room. "Please come and have a seat." Kamaru nodded. He took the recliner chair furthest to the upper right corner in front of the fireplace. "Do excuse my rudeness for not offering you to come in from the very beginning," Orochimaru said, taking his previous seat. "That's quite all right, sir," Kamaru recited monotone, still observing the residents. "Can I get you anything?" Kamaru looked at him solemnly. A chill ran down Orochimaru's spine, but he continued. "Something to drink, or eat perhaps?" "No, I'm okay, thank you." It was a moment of silence until Kamaru seen an interesting picture on the fireplace. "I see you have a photo of the Leaf Village's Hokage." Orochimaru looked up to his fireplace. "Tsunade? Yes. We used to be friends." "Used to be?" Kamaru inquired. "What happened?" "I tried to kill her." Orochimaru deadpanned. Kamaru just stared at him expressionless. When Orochimaru seen no change in emotion, he continued. "But there's absolutely nothing to worry about. I served my time from it." In saying this, he was also thinking, "That wasn't the only time I served," and chuckled inwardly. "I went for assault, murder, theft. Well, that's the reason you're here now, isn't it? I'm a changed man now." He concluded and smiled as bright as he could. "Tell me, mister." Kamaru dragged. "Oh, I'm sorry. Just call me Orochimaru." He smiled. "Well, Orochimaru, do you have any children?" "A wife as well." The words came out so naturally, but he regretted it the moment he said it. Well, he's been lying about it so long, it just came out without him knowing until he said it. "You do?" Kamaru questioned. "Boy or girl?" "I have a boy. He's gone this far with lying about it, might as well keep going." "But it wasn't all a lie, he only kidnapped little boys." "Where is he?" "He's at school." "How old is your boy, sir?" "He's 8. Orochimaru thought if he could keep his answers short, he wouldn't be able to make a mistake that could backfire. "What's his name?" He caught himself before it was too late. "Naruto Kinpachi." "Naruto, huh? That sounds familiar." Kamaru thought. "Your wife conceived." Orochimaru looked at him as if saying, "What the hell kind of question is that?" But he answered anyways. "Yes, so where's your wife?" Orochimaru was reluctant. "Sir, please answer my question." Orochimaru looked down. My wife accused me of cheating, and when I'd walk in the door she'd get loud and wake the boy up. So one day, I just grabbed my son, and left." "I see. Do you work, sir?" "Yes, I do." Another lie that just flowed so naturally. "Where might I ask?" "Orphanage, that's where I got Naruto from." "I thought you said your wife conceived." Kamaru insisted skeptically, narrowing his eyes slightly. "Damn, she did," Orochimaru said frantically. We figured we were unfit to raise a child, and gave him up for adoption. A year later we found him, and took him in." "I see." Kamaru then looked over at the fireplace again. "Who is this?" he said, pointing towards one of the photos containing red-haired girl. "Is she your daughter?" Kamaru asked. "Yeah, let's go with that." Orochimaru thought, chuckling to himself again. "Yes," the snake said sadly. He also had a morose look across his features. Kamaru noticed this and asked, "What happened to her?" Shush. Orochimaru made a fake sobbing noise and put his head down. "She died before I had Naruto. She was only— how old could this bitch be? 7 years old when a truck hit her." Another fake sob. It was terrible. Now he was crying. All those years of practice really paid off. Kamaru showed a face that was tedious yet showed empathy. "I'm sorry to hear that. She was all I had." And he hiccuped, and something like that happens. His eyes were turning red as the salty substance rolled down his face. A moment of silence settled in, granted Orochimaru's fake tears were still audible. "As I said, I'm very sorry to hear that, and I think I've wasted enough of your time, please forgive me," Kamaru said with mixed emotions of charisma and sorrow. He arose to his feet and walked towards the door as Orochimaru followed suit. He opened the door, and by then Orochimaru's crying subsided. Kamaru sauntered out the door and stopped. He turned around on the verge of tears himself, but he pushed his tears back and said, "I know how you feel about your daughter. I myself had a daughter until she was kidnapped, found the next day and reported on the news that she was dead, and covered in blood." His eyes became watery again. "So please accept my apologies for resurfacing morbid memories. It's okay." Then there was a faint crying that Kamaru amazingly heard. "What's that?" Kamaru asked, watery eyes vanishing. "What's what?" Orochimaru asked a bit saddened. But not by the story, but for the fact that he wanted to kill his daughter and hates that he missed out on such a perfect opportunity. But incredibly he wasn't lying. He didn't hear anything. It sounds like crying. Another chill ran through the snake's body, and he tensed again. He then turned his head around, and after about 5 seconds he turned it back around, another wave of tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry. I was trying to hold it back, but it was just too much. It's really embarrassing crying in front of Anyo, another man, like this." He tried whipping the tears away from his pale skin with the back of his hand, sobbing and hiccuping, putting on quite a show. "It's okay. Shedding tears shows you're human. I wish I could, but my daughter, Yumeki, was everything, and when she died—" "Hurry this along," Orochimaru mentally sighed. "I had nothing," Kamaru finished. "Yeah, it's nothing like a man and his daughter, huh?" Orochimaru said with a smile. Kamaru nodded with his same blank face. "Yes, well, I'm sorry for troubling you, have a pleasant evening," Kamaru said, turned around and walked down the walkway. Orochimaru stayed quiet until Kamaru was at the sidewalk, and closed the door. He turned around with a grin plastered on his face. "How stupid can you be? Then he tells me about his daughter, ha, how pathetic. I'm glad the bitch died, and I think it's about time for another bitch to die," he said venomously, as he stormed over to the basement door, and with immense force, jerked it open. The crying was clearer now. "Little brat." He ran down the basement stairs, and to the door the light reflected onto, and opened it. Naruto lied on the hard, cold basement floor crying his eyes out. "I thought I told you to shut up," Orochimaru yelled. Naruto became silent, and stared at the snake resembling man with little ocean blue eyes. Orochimaru grabbed Naruto by the torso of his baby blue footy pajamas. "Don't think I won't kill, I can always go get another." That's when Naruto began crying again. Orochimaru let out a stressful sigh. Kamaru stood on the rough pavement contemplating his next move when he heard a distant yelling. It sounded like someone was calling him. Kamaru. Kamaru sir. Said person looked to his left then to his right, and seen his officer Yun running toward him. His medium-length black hair swayed from side to side, as his dark brown eyes shined in the sun. Yun stopped a mere 5 inches away. He seemed out of breath. He was panting and bending over holding his knees through his blue pants. His brown leather jacket poofed up when he bent over, disclosing a better view of the Leaf Village's sign on his back. Ko Kamaru sir. I finally caught up to you. Yun. Kamaru questioned. What are you doing here? Kamaru narrowed his eyes at his officer. I believe I told you to stay back and alert me if any information was given. Yeah, but I asked if Officer Hitaki could take over that position. You know the newbie, Hitaki? Yes, I know Hitaki, he's a spectacular officer. And you've only been here 6 months, so do you have the right to call him a newbie? But I must be good to be with the top detective in Konoha in just 6 months, right? You show promise I suppose. Yun nodded enthusiastically. Right, so what the plan sir? Plan? I didn't have one actually. Just going from house to house telling people the situation. Hoping to find a change in attitude. Oh, Yun said. If you're doing it, it's good enough for me. Yun said, closed his eyes and smiled. Kamaru nodded. Better get to work then. After hours and hours of interrogations, Kamaru and Yun rests on the same black metal bench Kamaru settled on his first arrival in the village. Yun falls back lazily with the back of his neck rubbing against the smooth metal, heaving heavily. As Kamaru sits with his elbows on his knees, looking directly across at some blades of grass on the lawn in a thinking position. All those interrogations, and not one, seemed like they had the slightest idea of what I was talking about, Yun said, his heart racing uncontrollably. No, Kamaru said. I have a feeling we'll be coming back here. Yun looked at him with a perplexed expression, his heavy panting put aside for the moment. Why do you say that? He asked, suddenly perking up. Did someone give you a lead on the kidnapper? He now had a sudden burst of energy, and looking into Kamaru's left eye. Kamaru seen Yun from the corner of his eye and sighed deeply. Not exactly, but it is a 7% chance the kidnapper is in this village. So we'll have to keep this in mind. No matter where we go, we will not rule out this village. Kamaru said and narrowed his eyes at the gray and black house. Not yet anyways, he concluded slowly. Yun nodded. But don't tell the parents this information. Got that? He didn't quite understand why, but he nodded again. Right then, shall we make our way back? Right. Orochimaru looked through the window in his bedroom as the detective and his officer stood from the bench and left the village. A sinister grin graced his pale-skinned complexion. Ah, such a lousy detective. Orochimaru spat, walking over to his bed which Naruto laid on with his pacifier looking around, and grabbing the sheets with his non-developed finger muscles. Right underneath the same roof, and he couldn't even see through those fake tears and his pathetic emotions for his daughter. He sat on the edge of the bed, and grabbed Naruto's baby hair gently pulling and playing with it. I really do wish I could have killed her. Then he sighed and stood on his feet. Oh well, I can always kill you if you ever forget your place. The snake said, looking over at the many strands of hair on top of Naruto's little head, and smiled. Naruto stared at him for about 10 seconds before bursting into another set of tears. Orochimaru's face screwed up. He picked him up and vibrated him slowly. Naruto cried in his ear. You have to be the biggest crybaby ever. Damn, you just don't shut up, do you? Orochimaru groaned, as he bounced Naruto up and down, and pretty soon her heard a burp. Orochimaru pulled Naruto in front of his face, who put his left index finger in his mouth, as they stared at each other. Orochimaru smiled. That's the first thing you have. Before he could finish, Naruto threw up his smashed peas all over his face. Then Naruto put his finger back in his mouth, and chewed it. Orochimaru sat him gently on the bed, and grabbed a towel in the bathroom next to his TV, and wiped his face off. His expression was unclear until he cleaned his face, which now showed him smiling. I'm going to kill you, you little bastard. Orochimaru said, his smile never leaving his face. Naruto just spoke his baby nonsense again. In the yellow and red brick house, Yondaime paced back and forth with an indignant look on his face, mumbling something that sounded like, "Son of a bitch kidnapped my son." When I see the bastard or bitch that did it, I'm going to fucking kill it. Kushina flinched when her husband yelled the last couple of words. It had to be about 5 or 6 hours since the detective and his officer left their house this morning, so right about now it had to be about 7:30 maybe. Why Yondaime? Kushina began. Her voice was trembling and sounded a bit raucous. Try to calm down, okay? She looked at him pleadingly. Scanty white lines ran down her cheekbones and off her chin. Calm down, Yondaime questioned loudly, yielding his pacing. Kushina, how could you say that, and our son have been kidnapped? He said with a tinge of anguish in his voice. She just sat there, eyes half open and looking to the floor somberly. Then the anger came back within his tone. Who knows what the hell's happening to him right now? He yelled, and she flinched again. Then she raised her voice with her eyes closed. Yondaime, please. He was silenced. You don't think I know that? You don't think I feel the same way you do? Her tone became more ominous. My baby is out there somewhere, maybe crying for his mommy, and I'm not even there. The brim of her eyes glistened. And I may never be there, ever again. The tears rolled down her face. He ran over to her and embraced her within his arms, as she cried in his shoulder. It'll be all right, Cushion, Yondaime said softly, comforting her. We'll get Naruto back, I promise. About 30 minutes later, there were 3 knocks on the door. Kushina, who was sitting on the couch closest to the door, just ignored it and resumed her gaze at the floor. Yondaime ran from the kitchen into the living room and stared at his wife's absent form. Then another knock brought him from his daze, and he answered the door. It was the detective and his officer. They stared at each other for about 5 seconds before Kamaru asked to be let in. Kamaru and his officer Yun sat on the couch across from Kushina and Yondaime. Once seated, Yondaime put his right arm around his wife's shoulder and brought her closer. But she just continued looking to the floor with no response. Kamaru cleared his throat. Sound Village, the detective began, and after a minute's hesitation, he continued. Is no longer an option. Kushina became more upset, and buried her face into Yondaime's chest, sobbing lightly. He caressed her back. So where will you search next? Yondaime asked, and Kamaru shook his head. I'm not certain. We couldn't pick up any other clues along the way, and the village's people were completely absent-minded on the entire ordeal. He said, and darted his eyes to Yondaime's wife until Yondaime spoke again. He drifted his sight back to him. Of course they wouldn't know anything about it. They're lying to you. Whoever it is. Yes, perhaps. But I have to go by what has been told to me. And what might that be? Yondaime uttered impatiently, with a hint of animosity in his voice. Kamaru sighed deeply. What was told was completely preposterous in the light of this investigation. In other words, it was completely useless. Yun looked at his captain. He had some sort of lead, but he wouldn't tell him or the parents. The entire way back Yun tried getting some information out of him, but all he'd say was, just wait. I'll tell you when the time is right. That's it. Okay, but that still doesn't answer my question. What did they tell you? Yondaime asked abruptly. Kamaru was silent. Well, Yondaime urged on. I told you. They didn't tell me anything. Anything useful anyways. Kamaru said and looked away from him. The best idea would be to just wait and see if any signs are to show up. Yun couldn't believe how naive and stubborn Kamaru was being. His eyes widened at his suggestion. Does he actually expect them to wait while he could just tell them what he knows? Yun asked himself. Should I tell them we know something? No, that would completely go against my captain's orders. But still he's only human. Kamaru doesn't know everything. He could just be making a big mistake by waiting around doing nothing. What if Naruto died if we were to wait? Or even worse, what if he's already dead? Yun's eyes grew even bigger. I had to tell them. Yun opened his mouth, but before anything came out. Come Yun, we're leaving. Then he rose to his feet. Yun, who was still sitting, was frozen. How could he be so stubborn? Yun screamed on the inside, taking all his potent ability not to just hit Kamaru in the mouth and make him tell them. Yun, Kamaru called. Let's go. Wait a minute, Yondaime hollered. Yun's eyes popped back in his head. Maybe he knows Kamaru is hiding something from him. Maybe he can force him to tell him what it is. Yun smiled warmly to himself. Yondaime narrowed his eyes at Kamaru and yelled. How the hell can we just wait here? So we wait for our son to turn 21 and start calling this bastard or bitch mommy, daddy? What the hell is your problem? Get back out there and find my damn son, you little bitch. Yondaime was heated, mad as hell, beyond the point of death and disgust, beyond every aspect of rationality. He was ready to kick somebody's ass. But Kamaru took no heed to this and stared blankly at him, and calmly said, "Get up, and let's go," turned around and walked out the door. Yun was still glued to his seat. "Now," Kamaru yelled from the sidewalk, and then Yun came back to realization and stood to his feet. "I am very sorry about this," Yun said. "Just get out," Yondaime said softly, his eyes peeling from Kamaru's standing position and to the floor. "But just get out. Get the hell out, damn it," Yondaime yelled, which caused Kushina to cry even harder. Yun hurriedly walked out the door. Then Yondaime embraced Kushina once again. As Kamaru and Yun walked back to headquarters, it was completely silent, until... "Why?" Yun asked softly. Kamaru turned and looked at him. "Why what? Why didn't you tell them you knew something? Why must they be in the dark about their son?" Yun said, his voice becoming deeper, and his pupils shrunk. His eyes looked evil, and full of anger and hatred. "Because," Kamaru began, but was interrupted Yun. "Because? Because what, sir?" Yun stopped walking, and so did Kamaru. "Because you can't stand to see anyone else happy, is that why? Because your fucking daughter died, no one else can have kids and be happy, huh? You're going to deprive them of their happiness because yours is gone? You don't give a damn about anybody but your daughter. But guess what, sir, she..." Yun stumbled backwards holding his left jaw, fell in the street, and looked at Kamaru in shock. Then Yun realized, he just hit me. He just punched the hell out of him. Yun broke out of his shocked phase and ran at him with a left hook, hitting him square in the right jaw. Kamaru tottered over, but caught his balance, and went for an uppercut to the stomach, knocking the wind out of him. Yun bent over and in pain, tightened his stomach and grabbed Kamaru's by his wrist. Then he quickly extracted Kamaru's fist from his stomach and twisted it over his head, and lifted his body up, flipping Kamaru over his shoulder and hitting his back on the curb. Kamaru moaned, and weakly grabbed his leg, which Yun swiftly snatched it away from his grasp, and jumped down to his feet. Yun stomped him in the stomach once, twice, 3 times, and with the 4th one was coming down, Kamaru used his right foot and kicked him in his left knee, popping it back. Yun groaned, and fell forward. Kamaru quickly pulled his knees in and Yun's nose fell onto his right knee. Blood came oozing out his nose. Kamaru pushed him aside and painfully staggered to his feet holding his stomach, and stepped back about 2 yards breathing heavy. Then Yun rose to his feet holding his nose, the sticky red liquid ran down and between his fingers, and with a watery substance on the edge of his eyes, he was also panting wildly. "Don't ever talk about my daughter that way. You got that?" Kamaru said angrily. Yun scorned at him, and said through wild pants, "Fuck you, sir. You can go to hell and find yourself another partner, because I'm through with you." Yun said and began to walk the opposite way there was first intending on going. Kamaru, who was still pissed, said, "Fine, if that's what it must come to I will," he said staring at the back of Yun's head. "Adios then. I'll find this guy on my own. I don't need you." Yun bit back, and that was that. There were a few mumbles from Yun when he'd say, "He's holding me back," or "Good riddance, I don't need him." Other than that, it was absolute silence. But you couldn't say the same for Orochimaru, there was nothing but noise. Naruto cried every 10 minutes. Naruto and Orochimaru was now in Naruto's room with him on the head of the bed, crying. Orochimaru held his ears with his eyes closed. It was like every 5 seconds Naruto didn't get what he wanted, he'd cry louder and louder. And there was no end to how loud he could go, it was like a soprano. "What do you want, damn it? I tried giving you food, toys, milk, the pacifier, even that frozen thing over there for your teeth. What the hell could you possibly want now?" Naruto cried, waving his hands and legs in the air and slamming them back down on the bed, while turning his head side to side. Something like those spoiled 5-year-olds you see in movies where they're in a toy store, and they didn't get what he wanted and fell on the floor and started crying about it. "Fine. Here, just take your pick, which one do you want?" Orochimaru said, pushing the bottle with the food in it in his face, the bottle with the milk in it, his toys, his pacifier, and his frozen ring for his teething. But he didn't stop crying, that is until Orochimaru picked something white off his fuzzy blue footy pajamas. Then the crying stopped immediately with him putting his left index finger in his mouth. Orochimaru squinted at the white ball in between his thumb and index finger. You could barely see it, many would define it as microscopic, but not Naruto. Then Orochimaru dropped it back on him, and the crying continued. Then he quickly took it off, and then it stopped again. You got to be kidding me? If you aren't the whiniest little crybaby there is, it's fucking cotton. Orochimaru growled, holding it up to his face. Naruto just smiled and grabbed his finger, and the cotton fell on him again. Wah! Orochimaru searched Naruto frantically for the microscopic piece of cotton. Oh shit, where the hell is it? 8 years later, Yondiami and Kushina were mending from their child's kidnapping 8 years ago, but the pain could never fully heal no matter how much happiness they portray. Is it true that scars heal in time? They're not visible, but are they truly gone? It was about 12 a.m. and the clouds were departed in discerning a beautifully evening sky. It was these kinds of days worth getting up for. Warm weather, bright skies, and a loving moment in the sand made life worth living. The beach is a hell of a place. Soft, slightly moist sand mashed between their toes, and calm water waves rode above the shoreline. Hand in hand walking along the beach, Yondiami said, Kushina. She turned to him with a blissful smile that graced her lips. Yes, she answered. I love you, he told her. He devoted telling her every chance he had on the account of their son's tragic incident. Their hearts may be mending, but they cannot be whole, and the void that lingers within cannot be filled or replaced. I love you too. They both knew the painful sensation that one must undergo to accept one's child's death, raping, beatings, or kidnapping in their case. They were in the dark about Naruto. He could very well have been killed 8 years ago, or and through to curve to fend for his own. Possibly even beaten half to death, or actually dead. It's an uncertainty. But what they do know is that they must try to forget and move on and love each other. But how can they when their only son is possible dead? Or being sold off at some auction and is halfway around the world giving some random guys blowjobs, and God knows what else. It was too awful. They had to try and forget, but they couldn't, wouldn't, shouldn't. They shared a kiss and embraced each other fearfully. Naruto. Orochimaru screeched maliciously. The malevolent scream pounded through the blonde's ears. Naruto. Orochimaru was becoming fed up with his son, and he thought it was time he taught him a lesson. When Naruto appeared before him with a silver platter with buttermilk pancakes, a glass of orange juice, a few strips of bacon, and 2 scrambled eggs, all on a piece of fine china Naruto was forbidden from touching, he placed the platter on the bed. I'm sorry it took me so long. Shut up. How many times did I call you boy? His guardian narrowed his eyes, laid lazily in his bed with a stern look on his face. How many? He asked earnestly. Twice, I think. Naruto said tentatively. An aghast feeling flushed him. I'm sorry, I was out. Out doing what? What did I tell you about going out? Boy, didn't I say outside was off limits to you unless you were going to school, huh? Didn't I say that? Or unless I say you can? Naruto stood stupefied in a light of fear, as his lungs filled with mucus and his voice became hoarse. Why you told me that. But I was just. You ungrateful child, Orochimaru spat spiteful. He sat up straight and grabbed the boy by his collar and abruptly yanked him closer. I take you in, give you a decent home, food, bed, and send you to one of the best academies in the village. And you have the nerve to disobey and talk back to me. Ungrateful little bastard. He raised his hand and backhanded him, never releasing his grip. Naruto whined, trying his best to pull away. I'm sorry, Naruto cried. Tears rolled down his red, abused cheek. Orochimaru charismatically swapped hands and with a puissance backhanded him again. Naruto cried out painfully. Please stop, I'm sorry. Did you just give me an order? Orochimaru asked inauspiciously. Naruto felt shrunken in fear. Did you just give me an order? He repeated solemnly. The blonde was perplexed and frightened. He held back his tears long enough and involuntarily asked, what are you talking about? His father, with no sensible reason except for his merry enjoyment, punched him in the eye. Naruto didn't yell, nor cry from the assault from the ravage. He stumbled back and fell on his butt, sniffling uncontrollably. Orochimaru stood to his feet looming over the boy. The cerulean's morose expression plastered upon his face showed a somber little boy contempt in fear holding his eye. Do you think I like hitting you? Naruto didn't answer. I asked you a question. The blonde hesitantly shook his head like an impoverished child at wit's end. The pale-skinned man said, "Of course I don't. I only reiterate distressful barrages against you because I love you." Sesquipedalously, he used big words that he was sure the boy couldn't understand at his age. "1. Do you understand?" he asked. Naruto nodded his head approvingly. Only he didn't understand a word. Orochimaru lifted the boy up and hugged him tight. "I love you, Naruto," he whispered softly. Naruto reluctantly wrapped his arms around the man. "I love you to daddy." Then he dropped him back to his feet. "Go wash yourself up. Are we going somewhere?" Naruto asked at his father's revulsion with a newly profound enthusiasm of love and excitement. "Yes, I'm going to take you to go get some ice cream." Naruto's childlike instincts were aroused and cheered at the milky sweet treat. The blonde closed his eyes and walked out into the hallway, and returned with the daily newspaper. "This is what I went outside to get you," Naruto said with his eyes closed and a bright smile. Orochimaru felt bad for abusing him so carelessly. On second thought, he really didn't give a damn. Crossing the street to their house, Orochimaru unexpectedly felt the warmth of Naruto's hand slip between his fingers. Orochimaru only smiled as they paddled their way across the street and into the house. "Daddy, can Jugo come over?" Naruto inquired, never looking at the man as he was too indulged in his ice cream. "Jugo? And who might that be?" Orochimaru asked and walked into the living room and plopped down on the couch. Naruto followed after him and jumped up on his lap. "Yes you are. You cry like a baby." Jugo teased, smirking. He walked over to Naruto and poked him in his chest. "You're a baby." "I'm not." Naruto fumed. He smacked his finger away, but that didn't stop Jugo from starting over again. "Stop poking me," Naruto yelled solemnly. "What? Are you going to cry if I don't, little baby?" Jugo found it fun to tease Naruto. He'd get so angry until his face turned red, and he'd look so cute. "I'm not a baby." Naruto tackled him. Rolling around in the dirt, Jugo flipped him over, pinning him down. Naruto struggled under his straddling, and managed to kick him off and rolling on two of him, holding him down. "Who's the baby now?" the blonde inquired with a victorious grin. "Get off me," Jugo growled. He pushed Naruto over and picked himself up. Naruto was chuckling as he dusted himself off. "You're so stupid," Jugo spat out. Naruto's laughter when he dominated him in anything always made his temper that much shorter than it already was. Naruto's laughter subsided, and the auburn-haired boy turned to look at him. "What's wrong with you?" Jugo inquired, somewhat irritated. Naruto pointed his finger and Jugo followed it. Naruto pointed to a raven-looking boy. He had pale skin, coal-black eyes and a duck hairstyle. He was walking with someone. The man he was walking with was much taller and looked exactly like him, save for the hairstyle, which fell on all sides of his face. They had luggage in their hands, and they were taking a train somewhere, judging that they stood in front of a train station. The smaller boy's face held an expression of sorrow, while the taller one looked impassive. "Who are they?" Naruto inquired, ogling at the smaller boy, watching his every movement. Jugo shrugged. "I don't know," he admitted nonchalantly. Jugo sauntered over to the swing set and sat on one of the swings, rocking back and forth. "Why?" Naruto couldn't keep his eyes off the boy. He perceived he was about his age, but looked a bit bigger. "Is he in our school?" Jugo shrugged again. "I never saw him," Jugo admitted, pushing himself higher and higher off the ground. "Come on," Naruto said. "Come on what? I want to go talk to him." "Go ahead, I'll be right here," Jugo stated. Naruto huffed. "Fine, I'll go by myself," Naruto growled and stormed off. "Don't get hit by a car." Jugo smirked, and Naruto stuck his tongue out at him before walking off. "Baby." Naruto crossed the street and walked over to the train station. He looked around for the Raven boy and found him sitting on the wooden bench, his head lowered, and Naruto sauntered to him. "Hi," Naruto greeted perpetually. The boy steadily looked up at him. The other one, who they thought to be a man, was no more than a teenager, 16 perhaps. The 16-year-old stared at Naruto unflappably. "What's your name?" Naruto inquired gleefully, a grin on his face. The little boy turned to look at the 16-year-old, who nodded. Sasuke," he said shakily. "I'm Naruto." Naruto chuckled. "What's your last name, Naruto?" the teenager inquired. Naruto stared at him, lost. He didn't know, he was never told. He would always just write Naruto on everything, never a last name. I don't know, Naruto answered imperturbably. What's yours? He asked, but was really directing it towards Sasuke, who didn't say a word. His eyes were downcast to the ground. Sasuke, the teen called. He's talking to you. Huh, oh, Uchiha, Sasuke said. He seemed out of it. Are you two brothers or something? Naruto inquired, looking back and forth between the two. The teen smiled. We are actually, he said. Oh, Naruto was staring at Sasuke, before turning to the other boy. What's your name? Itachi Uchiha, Itachi said cheerily. All aboard for Konoha. All aboard, the engineer shouted. Itachi rose up, smiling down at Naruto. This is us Sasuke, said boy looked around, his eyes distant. Sasuke, Itachi called, snapping him from his daze. Sasuke hesitantly rose to his feet. It was nice meeting you Naruto, but this is our train. Itachi said. Oh, okay. Bye Itachi, bye Sasuke. Itachi nodded and Sasuke raised his hand with a tiny slanted smile. Then they off and on the train and Naruto ran back over to Jugo. So, Jugo urged. So what? Who are they? You would know if you went over there with me, now wouldn't you? Naruto teased, attempting to make him feel guilty. Naruto, Jugo growled. Alright, the tall one's name is Itachi and the other one is Sasuke. Naruto said, and looked at the sky, then the ground. What's wrong? Jugo inquired anxiously. Do you know my last name? Naruto asked, kind of embarrassed. Who didn't know their own last name? Jugo blinked once, then twice. No, I don't think so. Why? No reason, Naruto grinned. I was just asking. Oh, okay, Naruto. Naruto and Jugo turned towards the blonde's house, staring at the snake in the doorway. It's 7:30, time to come in. Orochimaru shouted. Oh, bye Jugo, Naruto said somberly. Bye Naruto. Jugo waved off grievously. Then Naruto ran off to the man, and looked up at the snake. Can Jugo come over tomorrow? Naruto asked. Maybe some other time, Orochimaru insisted, looking down at the boy. Now go wash up, and get into bed. Naruto brushed past him, and up the stairs. Jugo stared as Naruto entered the house, and then looked up at the man, who glared at him. Jugo gave him the finger before jumping from the swing and walking home himself, a smirk evident on his features. Little bastard. Orochimaru gritted his teeth and slammed the door. Naruto lied in his bed, lamp on, and the sheets drawn over him as Orochimaru tucked him in. What's wrong Naruto? He inquired after discerning his mournful face. Daddy, what's my last name? Orochimaru tensed slightly. He couldn't tell him his real last name, and he never gave Naruto a last name. He didn't even know if he himself had a last name. Why do you ask? Orochimaru inquired. He was biding time to think. He knew he told somebody about Naruto, and gave him a last name, but what was it? I was just wondering. I never knew what it was. Naruto said, and Orochimaru sighed before taking a seat next to him on the bed. It doesn't matter what your last name is Naruto. He lied. He rubbed his thigh with one hand. As long as you know who you are, nothing matters. He smiled, causing Naruto to smile a little. I know, Naruto giggled at the ticklish feeling of his father's hand. But I just wanted to know. Orochimaru sighed to himself. Why couldn't he have just accepted that? He sighed again. I'll just make up another weight. He grinned to the boy. Okay Naruto, if you really must know. Your last name is Kinpachi. Orochimaru stated. Naruto Kinpachi. Naruto questioned. Sounds kind of funny to me. I know, that's why I didn't want to tell you. He chuckled. It's a silly last name, but that's you. Naruto Kinpachi. Naruto grabbed the hand rubbing his thigh before it went any higher than it already was. Thanks Dad. Naruto smiled. No problem. Orochimaru leaned over and kissed his forehead. Time to go to sleep now, he said and turned off the lamp's light. Naruto released his father's hand and placed his own on his side. Good night, Daddy. Good night Naruto. Orochimaru said, and he was asleep in seconds. Orochimaru used his finger to slither his hand up the blonde's thigh even higher and flicked his manhood. He resisted the urge to do anything more and sighed. Then he got up and walked over to the door. In due time, I'll have what I want from you. In time. He opened and closed the door behind him. 6 years. That's how long it's been since Naruto seen Sasuke and Itachi. He thought about them almost every day, wondering why Sasuke looked so sad, and why was Itachi hiding his sorrow. Oh yes, Naruto seen the hurt in the teen's eyes, albeit, he hid it well. He also wondered why Sasuke continuously spaced out, his eyes lost. Was he thinking of something? What was he thinking about? Naruto spent a great deal of time anxious about their situation, although he shouldn't. He'd probably never see them again. At least that's what Jugo kept saying. Now that he thought about it, where was Jugo anyways? Naruto had been trying to get in contact with him for some time now. He tried calling him, leaving messages on his answering machine, and making visits over to his house. But all the same he was nowhere to be found. Naruto sighed. Just a few more weeks until his birthday, he wasn't looking forward to it. He didn't really have friends, save for Jugo, and that probably accounts for being a prankster. His birthdays were pretty boring, so it would only be just another boring day. Orochimaru told him that his birthday was May 5th, but he also said that he was 14. Something wasn't right about that. If he was 14, and his birthday was May 5th, and he was born. Wait, when was I born? Naruto asked himself. He shrugged. Well, it all wasn't that important anyways, he thought. As long as he had a day of birth. But he wishes he hadn't. He sighed again. It was boring, kind of like his previous birthdays, save for the fact that there were people around on his birthday, Jugo and Orochimaru. Now there was no one around. He didn't know where Jugo was, and Orochimaru was only bothered with him when he needed something. Naruto was becoming a tad bit uneasy around his father. He was becoming touchy in ways that he thought a father shouldn't. Orochimaru hasn't touched him, but the blonde feared it was only a matter of time. No, what am I thinking? Dad wouldn't do that. Naruto liked being an optimist. It was better than going around all somber and whatnot. But no, Orochimaru hadn't touched him. The most he's done was caressed his thigh, much more than usual, but that was all right, he guessed. Naruto sighed once again. It was a boring day. Naruto! Orochimaru shouted. Naruto bolted up straight in his bed. Naruto! Orochimaru hollered impatiently. Said boy hopped from his bed and sauntered out his bedroom door. Orochimaru gritted his teeth. Where the hell is that boy? Naruto! The blonde appeared by his side in the next second. Yes, Naruto drawled wearisomely. Orochimaru whipped his head around, his glare meeting Naruto's eyes. The placid man was stationed on the couch, and was staring at the television. I told you to bring me my drink 30 minutes ago. He growled. What the hell were you doing up there? Naruto shook his head. I wasn't doing anything. I forgot, I'll go get it now. Naruto said and sauntered out the living room and into the kitchen. Orochimaru snarled before twisting around, resuming his gaze on the TV. Naruto sauntered over to the cabinets, pulling out a glass. He stalked over to the fridge, disclosing a bottle of cranberry juice, and he placed them both on the table. He opened another cabinet containing many alcoholic beverages. He reached for the vodka on the top shelf. He stood on the tip of his toes and stretched his arms. He jumped for it, but didn't reach. Damn it, why'd he put it so high? Naruto gasped. What good are you? Orochimaru whispered. His arms were wrapped around Naruto's waist as he hauled him up to grab the bottle. Naruto was still kind of surprised by the sudden action, and didn't move. Get it, Orochimaru ordered. Naruto blinked once before registering his demand, and he reached for the bottle. Grasping it around his knuckles, Orochimaru placed him back on his feet. Naruto swallowed. Dad? Your hand is too touching my, Naruto cleared his throat, hoping his father would get the message. His left hand was firmly placed onto Naruto's lower region. What are you talking about? Orochimaru growled, the digits of his hand tracing up and down his member, unnoticeably, as Naruto only felt the hand pressing against the fabric of his pants. My. Orochimaru sighed while rolling his eyes. He released the boy to grab his glass from off the table. Naruto gasped again when Orochimaru's hand coiled around the bottle of alcohol. Do you want some, Naruto? Orochimaru inquired, looming over the boy. Naruto looked up at him, perplexed. You're holding on to it as if you do. Do you want some? Naruto allowed the bottle to be taken from his grip. No. Naruto responded shakily. Orochimaru almost glared at him. If Naruto were to say yes, he'd get him drunk and, well, perform pedophiliac activities with his body. But he didn't glare, his expression went impassive. You can have a little if you like. He offered again. "Oh yes, Naruto, you're old enough now. Just take it in." "No, I don't want any," Naruto replied, and Orochimaru shrugged, pouring the alcoholic beverage into the glass. "Damned bastard child." Naruto turned around and began to stroll off and back up to his room. "Naruto," Orochimaru called, pouring the cranberry juice into the glass of vodka. Naruto turned around and stared into his father's yellow eyes. Sometimes he wondered why his eyes were yellow and his own were blue. Well, he wasn't bothered by it too much. But the hair was a bit odd, a blonde and brunette. He guessed his mother could have had blonde or he could have dyed his hair black. Again, whatever, it didn't matter much. "What happened to your friend?" Orochimaru inquired, unflappable. That perked Naruto's interests. After all, Naruto spent most of his time with Jugo that wasn't wasted on thinking about the Uchiha brothers. But Naruto and Jugo were best friends. Jugo. Naruto deflated at his name. "I don't know. I can't seem to get in touch with him anymore," Naruto expressed grievously. Orochimaru narrowed his eyes at the boy. Not out of anger, but contemplation. He took a seat on one of the chairs after shrugging his feeling of sympathy off. "Your birthday is only a few weeks away. Are you looking forward to it?" Orochimaru inquired, nonchalant. He took a gulp at the alcohol, a burning sensation lingering in the back of his throat. Naruto sighed. "Not really," Naruto responded sorrowfully, his eyes downcast to the table. He took another gulp of his drink. "Why is that?" "Because I don't have friends," Naruto replied hesitantly. "And my birthdays are always boring, and Jugo isn't even around," and he trailed off. "I'm just not in the mood." "I see," he belched. He smirked inwardly to himself. "It doesn't have to be boring, Naruto, just a bit painful." He thought manically to himself. "If you just let me have you." He mentally growled. "What would you like to do for your birthday?" Naruto shrugged. And with a sigh he said, "I don't know. I just want to go to my room now." Orochimaru sighed before taking a sip of the alcohol. "Then go to your room," he edicts. Naruto turned around. "I'll be up there later." Orochimaru chimed a tad bit too excited. But it went unnoticed by Naruto, but the words were enough for him to breathe sharply. "He isn't going to do anything. He's Dad, he wouldn't hurt me," Naruto assured himself. "Okay," Naruto whispered before sulkily stalking back up the stairs. An evident smirk was adorned Orochimaru's features. "Oh, I'll be up there. If you won't give yourself to me, I'll simply take you," he said to himself, a slight chuckle escaping his lips. He downed the rest of the alcohol before pouring more into the glass. 4 hours later, and a sleeping Naruto, the sun had began to set and fade behind the horizon. The sky becoming darker by the minute. "Naruto!" Orochimaru yelled maliciously. Said boy jumped, eyes half open. "Naruto!" The blonde groaned. Naruto rolled off the bed, his feet firmly placed on the floor as he pushed himself up. "What does he want now?" "Naruto!" Orochimaru shouted. It sounded as though he was becoming angrier by the second. "I'm right here," Naruto replied from atop the steps. Orochimaru was at the door, and had it ajar. "Get the damn door," Orochimaru growled, stalking back into the living room. Naruto allowed an exasperated sigh to escape from between his lips as he rolled his eyes. The door slowly creaked open of its own will as the blonde descended the stairs. "Naru!" A voice from the other side of the door called. Then the head popped into the crack of the door, disclosing a head of auburn hair. Naruto's eyes broadened, and he skipped steps. The door pushed open completely, revealing the teen. "Jugo!" Naruto shouted charismatically, and tackled the boy out the door. "Naruto, get off of me!" Jugo growled on the walkway of the pavement. He pushed the blonde aside, and rose to his feet. Naruto remained on the ground, glaring up at the boy. Jugo looked down at him, puzzled. "What? Where have you been?" Naruto all but shouted. Jugo rolled his eyes. "Does that matter?" the brunette inquired, helping the blonde to his feet. "Of course it does. I've been worried about you," Naruto admitted anxiously. "Ah, the little baby was worried about me," Jugo teased, and chuckled. Naruto snarled. "I told you to stop calling me that." Naruto barked and pushed him by his chest. Jugo staggered back. "Well, I would if it weren't true." Jugo pushed him back. Naruto tottered back. He snarled again. "Shut up!" Naruto hollered, tackling him onto the grass. They wrestled for a bit, twisting and rolling until Naruto pinned him. Naruto smirked. "Who's the baby now?" Jugo stared into his eyes before a smirk spread across his face. You are. He watched as Naruto gritted his teeth. Get off. Jugo shoved him aside, rolling back onto his feet. Naruto, lying on the ground, used his elbows for support. His eyes locked on the boy above him, but weren't quite looking at him, more as if looking through him. Are you just going to sit there? Jugo inquired, his hand out to the blonde. Naruto snapped from his daze, and looked at the hand in front of him before taking it within his own. They gradually dusted themselves off. Are we going to go inside now? Jugo inquired, slightly impatient. Yeah, come on, Naruto said, and led the way into the house, Jugo towed behind. Jugo closed the door behind him, and they walked past the living room, noting Orochimaru was drinking more alcohol. How long has it been since he's been drinking that stuff? How many bottles has he run through already? Naruto knew he was good at holding his liquor and all, but this was too long. Maybe he stopped while he was asleep, maybe. Hey dad, Naruto said, and was answered with a slur of words. Jugo walked past him and gave him a smug look, and Orochimaru grimed him. Naruto and Jugo stalked up the steps, and into Naruto's room. Jugo closed the door behind him. Jugo snorted. What? Naruto inquired, taking a seat on the edge of his bed. Your room's the same it was the last time I was in here. Orange is so ugly. He mocked, and Naruto glared at him. You're ugly. And how would you know, for as long as you were gone? I thought you had died. Naruto retorted. Jugo snorted again. You're still upset about that? I'm here now. Let it go. I wasn't even gone that long anyways. Naruto looked at him as though he were stupid. You were gone for 2 weeks. And you still haven't told me what you were doing. Naruto stated indignantly, crossing his arms over his chest. Jugo sighed. That's not important right now. The brunette stated, looking down on the boy. Naruto jumped to his feet with the quickness. Why isn't it? The blonde barked. You could have very well been dead. What, were you selling drugs? What? I wasn't selling anything. Jugo stated defensively. Did you steal something? Jugo sighed, shaking his head. I didn't steal anything either. So you killed someone? Naruto glared and pushed him. Jugo stumbled back a few steps before catching his balance again. Naruto. Jugo stated gravely. A damned murderer. I'm friends with a fucking murderer. Naruto thrashed about, murmuring swears under his breath. He brusquely whipped his neck around to the other boy. I hate you. Naruto growled, a somber tone tracing his words. That was extremely uncalled for. I didn't kill anyone. Jugo hollered, his voice matching Naruto's. Then what did you do? What did you do that was so wrong you can't even tell me? Jugo snarled before sighing. Do you really want to know? Jugo inquired, his voice toned to normal volume. Yes. Naruto hollered. Naruto's eyes traced Yugo's movements as his hand dug into his pocket. A second later, a blue box was exposed to the blonde. Here, Jugo said. What is it? Naruto inquired, disorientation plastered in his voice. Take it, and open it. Jugo ordered, cheer behind his words. Naruto looked up at the brunette, then back at the box. Naruto reluctantly took the box from his hands. Opening it revealed a silver-chained locket. Naruto's eyes broadened, mouth slightly agate. He could tell it must have cost a lot. Amidst the exterior of the locket lied a shamrock gem, Naruto's birthstone. It was green, and the trim was golden. Clicking it open, Naruto discerned the picture imprisoned within the locket as him and Jugo when they were kids. How long ago has it been since we took this picture? Happy birthday, Naruto. Naruto looked up at him, noting the small smile gracing the curve of his lips. Jugo took the locket from Naruto's hands, and stepped behind him, wrapping and hooking it around his neck. I wanted to give it to you on your birthday, but… Jugo trailed off, Naruto knowing the rest. It took me a while to find something worthwhile, 2 weeks actually, but I think I found the perfect gift. Jugo said. He turned the blonde around by his shoulders. So, Jugo goaded. Naruto was shocked, but his mouth slowly managed to form words of coherence. You bought this for me? Naruto inquired, taken aback. This must have cost a fortune. More, if you can believe that. Jugo stated. Naruto's eyes downcast to his feet. Why'd you spend so much on me? Naruto inquired. My birthday isn't that special. Jugo remained silent. No one's ever around, and I'm always alone anyways. Naruto unhooked the pendulum jewelry. Here, I don't want it. Jugo looked down at the locket in his hand. Then back up to the blonde. He sighed. You're not alone, Jugo stated monotone, taking Naruto's hand into his own. Yes I am. No one likes me. Dad doesn't even seem to like me anymore. And I'm always here when you need me, Jugo assured. He hated comforting people, probably because he wasn't very good at it. But he'd try. But this is why he doesn't get moody, just mad as hell. Naruto shook his head. No you're not. 2 weeks. Naruto, that entire time I was thinking of you. Naruto looked up into the eyes of the brunette. I was trying to give you the perfect gift but I guess I couldn't, he sighed. Perfect gift or not, I don't want it back, he said, closing the blonde's hand around the locket. But throw it away if you don't want it, but I'm not taking it back, Jugo stated. Naruto's gaze sank deeper into his eyes before his fingers clenched around the locket. Naruto diverted his gaze down to their feet again. Jugo smiled meagerly. You're an asshole, Naruto murmured, tearfully. Tears threatened to spill over, settling themselves on the edge of his eyes. Jugo snorted, turning away from the blonde. You're such a baby, Jugo said cheerily. Jugo groaned under Naruto's weight as the blonde tackled him to the ground. Jugo looked up, noting Naruto's teary eyes and smile. Who's the baby now? Naruto inquired, jovially. Hayes, y'all's keeps its, owns up theirs, Orochimaru slurred, indignantly. He went unconsidered. Get off me, Jugo growled. Make me, Naruto dared, his smile slightly growing. Naruto. Get off, Jugo barked defiantly. Ha, you're not even strong enough to. Naruto's sentence was cut short when Jugo flipped him over onto his back and climbed atop him. The brunette held the blonde's wrists above his head, staring down at him, a smirk adorned upon his face. Naruto still held the locket clenched in his fist. What were you saying? Jugo asked mockingly. Naruto strived to free himself from the brunette. Let me go, Naruto ordered. Jugo only smirked. Jugo, let me go. Naruto whined. Said boy leaned down to the blonde ear. Make me, he whispered. Or are you too weak? He scoffed. Jugo, get off. Naruto strived. He jerked himself to the side, kicked his feet, and bucked his hips. He arched his back, attempting to escape the boy's hold. Let go, Naruto shouted. Jugo chuckled. Naruto, he interrupted himself, moaning as Naruto bucked his hips upward, rubbing their members against one another. Naruto didn't seem to realize the boy's unnatural reaction, and bucked again. Jugo moaned, their pelvises rubbing against each other, having his blood rush to his member. Naruto bucked again, striving for freedom. He felt Yugo's grip loosen and continued to buck forward. Naruto, Jugo breathed out. Saint, stop moving, he sputters quickly. Then get off. He vigorously sprung his hips upward. The heated friction resulting in not only the brunette's breathily moan, but a slight whimper also escaped from between Naruto's lips. They both yielded all movements, except for their eyes that scanned the other's features speculatively. Neither teen's visage was distinguishable. How long has it been? A couple of seconds maybe? So why'd it seem like hours? Maybe. Naruto trailed off. He cleared his throat. Jugo continued to stare into his eyes, lost in an ocean of blue. Jugo, he was hushed when the firmness of the boy atop pressed between his thighs, and his lips gently pressed onto his own. Naruto's eyes widened, his hands shaking as Yugo's grip loosened. Naruto felt his body immediately tense, heat running through his body. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't move, blink, twitch. He couldn't feel anything. He only lied there, teaching himself how to breathe through his nostrils. Jugo had his eyes closed, embracing deeper into the kiss, all the while wondering why the hell it was he did what he did. But he couldn't stop. He couldn't control himself. Couldn't tear himself from the boy. All he could focus on was the taste of the blonde. Afterwards, Jugo felt the blonde's lips press against his, and his eyes meagerly opened, noting Naruto's eyes slowly drift close. Jugo shut his eyes, and hesitantly brought one on his hands to Naruto's hair, docilely caressing it with his palm. Jugo pulled away, staring into the eyes of the boy below. A form of silence fell between the two. They didn't move a muscle. I'm sorry. Naruto blushed. He could feel the brunette's fingers twiddling with his hair. For what? Jugo asked softly. That, Naruto whispered. I didn't mean to tempt you, Naruto stated quickly, turning his head away. Jugo smiled a little. He slowly turned the blonde's head back to him, Naruto's eyes widening due to the soft contact of the brunette's lips. Naruto slumped into the kiss, permitting him the advantage. Jugo pulled away, staring down on the blonde, his small smile incessantly eminent. "You don't have to be sorry, just be Naruto. That's what tempted me." Yugo's smile broadened meekly. Naruto turned away, a blush on his face, and Jugo scoffed. "Baby, shut up," Naruto stated softly. He wrapped his arms around the brunette, whom lowered his lips onto the blonde's. Naruto lied asleep in his bed, the necklace hanging around his neck. But Jugo had left some time ago, murmuring something about getting home before it got too dark. Before he left, he tentatively placed a kiss on Naruto's lips, the blonde smiling in return. The door creaked, and Naruto groaned lightly. A shadow fell over the blonde's body as an indistinguishable figure crept over to the occupant, stumbling against the leg of the bed, cursing it. The figure held a cylinder-shaped object in his hand. Naruto groaned again, shifting around absently. The stranger loomed over the boy, lasciviously. Stealthily, he crawled into the bed next to the teen, hovering over top of him. Naruto tautly drew his eyes open, blinking several times before they adjusted properly. He yawned. "Dad? What are you doing?" he inquired wearily. Naruto's eyes broadened when Orochimaru's lips collided down onto his. The man prodded the inside of the blonde's mouth with his tongue. Naruto could taste the sharp burning aftertastes of alcohol dissipating inside his tavern. Orochimaru held both of Naruto's hands above his head by his wrists with one hand, whilst the other was firmly pressing down onto his chest, restricting movements. Naruto could feel the cylinder-shaped object pressing to his, and he discerned it as another bottle of alcohol. Naruto shifted his body, growling in the man's mouths. Orochimaru removed his tongue from the boy's throat, a smirk upon his features as he stared down at the blonde. "Dad, what are you doing?" Naruto reiterated, mind distort. Orochimaru's smirk only broadened. "I's has, noffs of yo's runnin'." He slurred, his grip tightening. "I'ma get what's I's wants, nah." Naruto flinched slightly when the sheets were divested from around his body. "What are you talking about?" Naruto inquired fearfully. He didn't believe it happened. He wouldn't believe that it happened. It was only a dream, he kept telling himself. He wasn't going to believe what happened yesterday night to be true, because it wasn't. But how could it not be, when the pain was still there, physically and mentally? Naruto sighed as he looked at the reflection in the mirror. Light red water droplets rolled down his cheeks from the wound graced upon his head. He wouldn't believe it was his father's doings. He fell. Yeah, that's what happened, he fell. He fell and hit his head. Naruto cracked crooked smile. And his bruised wrists? He'd have to wear long sleeves until they healed, he guessed. But what about the limping? He was stretching and he pulled something in his leg. He was sure people could understand that. Perhaps he could even fool Jugo to believe it. Jugo. He didn't know how he would react if he found out about this. About what? Naruto asked himself. Nothing happened, so Jugo'll never suspect a thing. He smiled, deflating immediately once his reflection did the same, and he seen the artificialness behind it. He noticed the hurt behind the smile, and that's something he couldn't keep hidden. He could fool Jugo with the scars and bruises, but he was sure he'd notice the pain inside him. Naruto sighed. Lily eyes lowered to shaking hands. How was he going to get through this one? He felt his life take a spiral downhill. He just hoped it won't go any lower, and he hopes it won't happen again. He prayed to God it wouldn't happen again. He sighed once again, unevenly. If he can just get through today, he'd know he could get through this. Just one day was all it took. Naruto. His father shouted, and Naruto winced. Not at the tone, but by his voice in general. But nothing happened. He convinced himself. Hurry up before you're late. And I'm not driving to school this time. Okay, Naruto replied, his voice cracking. He stammered from the bathroom, quickly sauntering to his room. Orochimaru forced a growl to the back of his throat. Naruto. Hurry up. He shouted malignantly. He stormed over to the stairs, and in mid-step upon the first step, the doorbell rang. Orochimaru whipped his neck around, glaring at the door. Then he turned, glaring up the stairs, particularly at Naruto. He stormed to the door, injuriously jerking it open. What? He inquired with malice. His glare sharpened by 1,000 once he noted the auburn-haired boy casually standing at his doorstep. His eyes were half livened, whilst his backpack was slung over one of his shoulders, and his hands were buried deep within his pockets. "Is Naruto ready?" he asked nonchalant. This was pretty much the routine. Naruto takes hours in the bathroom, leaving Jugo to wait at the front door when he gets there because Orochimaru refuses to let him in. And he gets yelled at each morning, with the same question every day, or at least 5 days a week. The only good thing out of this is, when he comes over he's still half asleep, and Orochimaru's shouting pretty much wakes him up every time, expect today. He didn't get much sleep because yesterday. That must have been one of the happiest moments of his life, and he was sure Naruto went to sleep with a smile on his face like he did. But now, he kind of regrets it. Because damn is he sleepy. Wait, Orochimaru edicts. He leaves the door ajar as he stormed up the steps, but before he could get halfway up the stairs a blur of red and black clouded his vision. What in the hell? Orochimaru trailed lowly. Naruto dashed past the man as he slid down the rail, his backpack slung over on one shoulder, imitating Jugo. "Bye dad, love you." Naruto exulted, rushing out the door. He grabbed Jugo by his forearm and pulled him along. Orochimaru stood on the stairs staring down at the open door. Then a grin slowly crept around the corners of his lips. He's one hyperactive little rabbit. He strode to the door, closing and locking it. Once he's broken in completely, he's going to be fun to play with. Especially with all that energy, we could definitely put that to some use. He chuckled. He sauntered into the living room, and gracefully plopped down onto the couch placed to the right. "Oh, Naruto. He snickered. "You really are a special one." He smirked. "Oh my god, that hurt." Naruto thought. "I've got to stop sliding down that thing." You would have thought that he would at least have the proper knowledge to know not to slide down the rail. Common sense told him not to, but acting told him to do it. It would have been very un-Naruto-ish if he hadn't done it. "So Naruto," Jugo began, grasping the blonde's attention. There was a thin line of cheered towed with his words. "How'd you sleep last night?" Naruto tensed slightly, but thankfully Jugo didn't catch it. Naruto just threw his arms behind his head, his fingers laced together, and casually he said, "It was okay. It could have gone better." Jugo blankly stared at him. Slowly his stare became a scowl with each passing second that he seen the blonde's serious face. Naruto turned to him, startled by the look that practically burnt through him. "Why are you looking at me like that?" "Geez, I was just kidding." Jugo wasn't convinced. "Jugo?" Naruto inquired. "Jugo? Will you stop looking at me like that?" Naruto growled. The auburn-haired boy continued to glare through him. Naruto halted walking altogether, and as did the other. "Would you stop it?" he all but shouted. Then after a few seconds Yugo's glare reverted into a grim smirk, and Naruto noted the grim smirk tug at the boy's lips before being overruled with a wave of bewilderment. Jugo scoffed, turning back around and continued to walk on. "Whatever," he muttered, his hands buried in his pockets. Naruto stared at his back, studying the way his hips swayed, arrogantly, suiting his posture with each strode. He dawned from his daze and ran after him. "Hey, Jugo, wait up," he called, wincing with every step he took. "I should really factor this pain into my decision-making before making decision," he thought. Orochimaru laid on his couch to the far left, absently staring at the television. He had his usual alcoholic beverage at hand, his shoes off and feet up. He was content. That is, until his phone rang. Orochimaru groaned before rolling from the couch and grabbed the phone from the glass table next to the couch. He wished they would have called his cell phone, it was in arm's reach. "Hello," he drawled lazily. "Hello." The all-too sarcastic voice rang. "Kabuto." The other snickered on the other end. Orochimaru smirked, not quite knowing why he called, but it was always a pleasant surprise to hear his voice. "The one and only." Kabuto confirmed. "And what might you be calling for?" Orochimaru resumed his previous place on the couch, aimlessly staring at the fireplace. "Oh, I just wanted to say hi," Kabuto commented, his casual sarcasm laced in between. Orochimaru chuckled as the other snickered. "No, but more seriously," Kabuto began, his sarcastic tone wrenched dry, with being replaced with a more solemn tone. "How old is Naruto again? If I'm correct, I've had him for about 14 years now." "Why would you like to know that?" Orochimaru asked, mindfully intrigued. Kabuto gave a curt, "HMN," before going silent. After about 3 seconds his voice rang through the phone in a whisper. Because, these Konoha operatives have information on him as if he were 30. He whispered, pausing before beginning again. And I still can't believe you've had him for that long, but only a couple of months ago you decide to call me. Well, those Konoha ANBUs has been getting suspicious around here for the past 3 months, and now I'm interested in what makes them so curious about sound. Kabuto allowed a light-hearted chuckle to escape his lips. I see. So, did you do it? A broad smug grin reached the corner of the snake's lips, Kabuto sensing his triumph and smirked. I see, he drawled. Well, don't you worry about this, I'll handle it, and I'll terminate any lethal suspicions they may have. Right, keep me posted on it. Then the line went dead. A slight smile adorned his placid features. Kabuto crackled his knuckles before taking a seat on the leather chair behind Kamaru's desk. The detective had a litter of papers scattered haphazardly over his desk. Kabuto logged onto the computer, after he broke the password with ease. The glow from the computer screen reflected off his glasses, his eyes showing much deception. His fingers worked magically over the keyboard, all the while staying alert. The room was dark, save for the now lively computer screen, and there were security guards, police officers lurking around every corner. He would be lying if he said it was easy to get past security, even with his sly intellect. Kabuto breathed sharp, but lowly when he came across a file with Orochimaru's name typed in bold letters. He loomed the mouse over the file, showing that it was recently opened. He clicked it, revealing a picture of the man, and practically his life's biography. He read the scripture with an intent eye. Orochimaru-sama, age 53, was appointed with a condition that would make him seem younger than he actually is on July 27, 30 years ago. He has been imprisoned an unknown amount of times. He is a horrific individual, preying on the lives of young boys for his own personal satisfaction. Male. Birthday. October 27. Status. Dwelling in Sound Village. Blood type. B. Height. 172 centimeters. Weight. 57.3 kilogram. Prison number. 002300. Kabuto scrolled down the page where there were more scriptures. He held a growl in the back of his throat, as a smirk slowly formed the curve of the lips. He simply pressed the delete button, and it was all gone. He chuckled to himself. He went on about business, now looking through Naruto's file. There wasn't much on the computer as there was on Kamaru's desk. They hadn't even a picture of him on his profile. It isn't as if he were a criminal anyhow. Naruto Uzumaki, age is unknown. He was kidnapped when he was 6 months old. Proclaimed male. Birthday. October 10th. Status. Unknown. Blood type. B. Height. 166.0 centimeters. Weight. 50.9 kilogram. There was nothing else written at the bottom. No point in erasing this, I suppose. Kabuto continued to. He stopped all movement. He heard someone's feet clattering against the tile floor from outside the door. He breathed a sigh of relief when they moved on. He continued to spy and delete. Naruto. Jugo whispered, as the teacher had his back turned, writing on the blackboard. Jugo stared at Naruto incredulously. Ever since he sat down he wasn't able to sit still for a second. Naruto. What's wrong with it? Nothing. Naruto answered, in a whisper, wincing slightly. It just hurts like hell to sit. But it hurts even worse to move. Oh, I wish I could just stand up. Then stop moving. Jugo whispered defiantly, his eyes narrowing into a thin line. Naruto didn't stop. Naruto. He stated firmly. I'm trying, okay. Naruto bit back. He was trying, but it really hurts to sit. It really hurts to do anything except stand still, even though that has a slight pain to it itself. Then try harder. Jugo said a bit harsher than intended. Naruto growled at him. Look, I'm trying and that's all I can do. Naruto said louder. So why don't you get the hell off my back about it? He growled. Naruto. The teacher stated. This is the second time you've disrupted the class today. One more and you'll be standing outside the door. Standing? Naruto thought. Why didn't you just say so? The man nodded before partially turning midway back around to the board. You know something, Teach, you are damned boring. I get more excitement breathing air than listening to you talk. Naruto. Jugo said, surprised. That's it, Uzumaki, get out of my classroom. The teacher ordered, pointing his finger towards the door. Naruto non-reluctantly stood and strode out the door, wincing every so often. I'll be out there momentarily, he said. Now, with everyone who was listening, I apologize for the interruption, but back to work. He turned and faced the blackboard, scribbling on it. What in the world is with Naruto? Jugo thought to himself. He's been acting strange lately. He glared at the door Naruto exited. Orochimaru sighed. He was bored. He needed something to pass the time. Perhaps I could get a job, he thought, but laughed the idea off. He had absolutely nothing to do. He watched his stories and drank all he was going to drink today. And that's why he was actually thankful for the knock at the front door. He sprung from the kitchen table and casually sauntered towards the door. Flinging it open revealed a man in an ABNU uniform. Orochimaru tried looking impassive. His solid brown eyes seemed as if they were gazing through him instead of looking at him, and Orochimaru felt a meager shiver swivel down his spine. He flaunted his badge, but Orochimaru's visage did not falter. May I help you? Orochimaru inquired cheerily. Maybe you can, the man said, stuffing his badge back into his coat. I'm Detective Yun of the Anbu Agency from the Leaf Village, and I've been on quite a long-term case about a kidnapping. Perhaps you've noticed the excessive amount of Konoha Anbu members lurking around. Orochimaru nodded. May I come in? Of course, he moved aside allowing the man into his home. Orochimaru sauntered off into the kitchen. And how could I help you with a kidnapping case? He asked, turning on his faucet. Yun had followed him into the kitchen. I know, this may be a long-shot question, but... He sighed. 14 years ago there was a boy named Naruto Uzumaki. He was only 6 months old when he was kidnapped from his initial home in Konoha. And I was wondering if you'd remember anything amiss in the neighborhood during the time period of his kidnapping 14 years ago. Orochimaru was sipping on faucet water, as he grabbed a glass from the cabinet while he was speaking. 14 years ago. Orochimaru leaned against the countertop in fraud contemplation. Why are they still on this? Orochimaru growled to himself. Let's see. Please, anything at all would be helpful. Yun pleaded. Orochimaru mentally sighed. I guess I could make up on weight, I don't have to. He thought. He guzzled down more of the water. Oh, Orochimaru began in spurious excitement. I remember, a man quite like you coming here before. He said. Yun did not react. I believe he said his name was, Kangaroo. Kamaru. Yun corrected nonchalant, his expression still solid. Ah yes, that's it. Orochimaru cleared his throat. Yes, well he came here I believe about the same case if I'm not mistaken. You're correct. We were once partners, but we went our own ways and I graduated to detective. But that's beside my upcoming. Did you notice anything else? He inquired. No, I'm sorry but I don't. Yun sighed defeated. Thank you for your time mister. He drawled. Please, just call me Orochimaru. He smiled. Yes, well thank you for your time Orochimaru. Yun voiced monotone, and strode back to the front door. Orochimaru towed, swallowing the remaining water in his glass. It was not a problem at all. Orochimaru proclaimed. I'll send word to Konoha if I ever hear anything. Yun nodded as Orochimaru waved him off. Once he was out of hearing radius, a grim smirk inevitably appeared upon his lips. And farewell. He closed the door, his inner self amused. That passed the time at least. Orochimaru shrugged. Yun stood on the sidewalk in front of Orochimaru's home. Little did he know that Orochimaru had his eyes on him through the transparent window from his living room. A woman clad in black soundlessly approached the detective. Captain, she began with a sigh. We've been searching for months and we've found nothing. That is untrue, Yun stated. I'm going to tell you something, but you are not to look over my shoulder once I do. He's watching me from the window. Yun said. Maybe he does know. Who is watching you, sir? The woman inquired, stretching his neck to peer over her captain's shoulder. No, Yun deadpanned, catching the woman's attention. Do not look. She nodded and gazed into blank chestnut eyes. I paid a visit to the owner inside the house behind me. This is the same house Kamaru stopped by when he first arrived in this village 14 years ago. The woman gasped. This is the one, she asked, attempting yet again to look over his shoulder. Abara, he stated firmly, slightly glaring down at the smaller woman. I'm sorry, please continuing. She suggested. Yun cleared his throat. As I was saying, Kamaru stopped by this house, and upon so I have reason to believe that he found something I didn't. Right before we returned to Konoha, he said not to count out this village just yet. Yun said, and took a breath. So we're not done here quite yet, not until I find out what it was Kamaru seen that I did not. So is that why you wanted to be the one to investigate this house in particular? Abara asked, and Yun nodded his approval. Would you like me to just ask Kamaru what it was he saw? No. He deadpanned, harsher than intended. Absolutely not. That's another reason I've moved back to this case. Kamaru himself has moved on, I'm sure, but he'll be back on the case eventually, and I want to solve it before he decides to come back. So it's out of spite then? She inquired, quite confused by it all. No, quite the opposite. It's out of recognition, and because it's my job to do so. Kamaru has never faced a case that he could not solve, and I'm 100% sure he'll be back on, especially a case like this. Yun said, his words drifting, barely audible to the woman, but she caught it. He began to stalk down the street, Abara toed. What do you mean by, especially a case like this? She asked. He only looked at her from the corner of his eye. Especially a kidnapping case is what I mean. He clarified. These types of cases are special to him, and it took me a while to understand that, but it was too late. We are both in different divisions now. He's in Division 12 and I'm in Division 8. He paused, looking up at the sky. I see, Abara added. So you're not doing this out of spite, but for him. She stated, and he nodded his approval to her again. Precisely. He replied curtly. Right, so what's the plan now? She inquired, a sudden charisma igniting within her. I'm up for whatever it takes so that you help Kamaru. Oh, but can I ask what's so special about kidnapping cases to him? Captain, she asked. Captain, no, was his clipped reply, and from the seriousness of his voice that was all he was saying. He took in her slightly deflated spirit from his peripheral and said, You're quite like me, Abara. Is that a compliment? She joked. Yun allowed a smile to form upon his features. Kabuto deleted another file containing information about the kidnapping. He had to have erased about 15 files on the case. Who would have thought that they could have so much information on the kidnapping of a 6-month-old baby? Quite impressive, Kabuto thought. Then he came across the site he was looking for. Got it. He smirked, his glasses gleaming from the computer screen as he pushed them up. Now let's see what you find so interesting, shall we? Kabuto read the page to himself. Upon researching the case of Naruto Uzumaki's kidnapping, I have come across a very suspicious character from sound. I didn't find anything for months, but I cannot cancel out the factor of Orochimaru, a sound village civilian. What we talked about was dire, and of much use to me. I seen through his lies, especially one in particular, and Kabuto looked up from the computer upon hearing something from outside the door once again. He decided to print out the paper. Afterwards I'll get out of here. He clicked print and waited impatiently as the damned thing began to rattle loudly and devour the paper before slowly spiting it out. 5%. He growled to himself. This is going to take a while. He opted to look through other files as he waited. At first he had the right mind to go and play solitaire, but that would be most foolish. He typed in his own name and what arisen onto the screen was not a surprise to him. Nothing. They had absolutely nothing on him. As many criminal acts that he's done, he never got caught. He was stealthy, sly, and willing to resort to any odds to keep a record like this. He went onto a different profile. How droll was that? He smirked. He then typed in Kamaru. Let us see what there is to reveal about you, eh? There was barely anything to show, save for a little girl of whom looked about 8 or 9. Her draping black hair took up most of the photo, and her onyx eyes sparkled innocently. And it looked as though she had a pink shirt on, but it couldn't be seen. The photo was only of her face, but some of the colorful material was discerned into the picture. Daughter kidnapped and believed to be D by a deranged older man in his 40s. The man was apprehended and in custody of the police. This tragic event was later reported on the news that not only was Yumeki covered in blood, but it seemed to have been spewing from all openings. Her eyes open, and her body tangled within a bloodied green blanket in the back of an alley inside of a dumpster. She was found by one of the local garbage men while he did his regular rounds. This tragedy struck hard at Detective Kamaru of Division 3. But we'll all mourn his loss and hope for him to recover soon so that nothing else like this ever happens again. HMN, was Kabuto's only reply to this. This is dated 15 years ago. Kabuto clicked on the link to go back to the printing process. 85%. It isn't taking as long as I thought. His head shot up towards the door once he heard rambling coming from the other side. Slowly he reached into the pouch he kept on his left leg, and pulled out a star-like object that you'd see in those classical ninja movies. Then he heard keys shuffling. He looked back down at the computer. 90%. The figure twisted the knob, and tiresomely began to push the door open. "Hey Kamaru." The door stopped. Kabuto looked back down at the screen. 93%. "Damn it, hurry up." He held a growl in the back of his throat. "How are you, Asuma?" Kamaru inquired. A tired look spread across his face. He winced slightly when a buzzing noise encircled around his ears and refused to go away. "You," Asuma began but was clipped short. "Wait, do you hear that?" Kamaru asked, intently halting all other senses, focusing them on hearing whatever that rattling noise was. "Hear what?" Asuma inquired. "It sounds like..." The printer spat out the paper and Kabuto snatched it, quickly pressing the sleep button on the keyboard. He grabbed his mask on the desk, and stealthily he crept over to the corner of the room where light from the open door beamed onto his shirt. Kamaru and Asuma entered the room, and the second Asuma stepped into the darkened room and Kamaru hit the light switch fluorescently brightening the room. Kabuto pushed off his side wall position just enough to escape the door before it closed when Asuma pushed it close. Kabuto was revealed to everyone with the brightness of the hallways. He looked to his right seeing two police officers talking, aimlessly walking in his direction. He jumped behind one of the cylinder pillars, watching in the corner of his eye as another man came towards him in a rush. Crouching down, he rolled over hiding against one of the receptionist's desk. Shimming along the side of the desk, so as to not reveal his hair to the woman behind the desk, of who had headphones on. He waited for the man rushing by to walk past, and the other two idly talking to walk by before he crept around the corner of the desk and dove behind another cylinder pillar. He saw his clearing towards the stairwell. He looked back at the woman behind the desk as she sang to herself while filing down her nails. He also noted Kamaru's door opening, and that's when he remembered he left the report of his daughter's death on the screen. Shit. He knew there was going to be a search out for him soon, so he had to get out as quickly as possible. He made a run for it towards the door and pulled the mask over his face, shoving the door open with his forearm. The stairwell was empty, or so he thought as a man and woman opened the door across from him. His eyes broadened. "What the hell?" The male cursed. "Who are you?" he asked. Before the two could comprehend what was happening any further, Kabuto threw his ninja-like star at them, and ran to the nearest staircase going down onto the first floor. "Hey, wait!" the man shouted after dodging the attack. He chased after him. The woman towed behind them. Grabbing the walkie-talkie from her shoulder, she alerted everyone of the intruder. "This is Division 5 Commander Kurenai, and this is an intrusion alert. Divisions 5, 6, 7, and 8 cover the first and basement floors." She ordered. She was losing them. "Yamato," she called, chasing after the two. The man didn't respond. She growled and ran through the nearest door and onto the first floor, where she seen Division 6 aim their weapons at her. "Wait, it's only me." A man clad in green approached her. "Kurenai, what's going on?" he asked. "There is an intruder heading towards the basement level. Yamato is chasing him as we speak." Guy nodded. "Everyone, down to the basement." Guy ordered, and everyone shuffled through the doorway Kurenai came from, and onto the elevator in case the intruder decided to go to higher levels for an escape route. Kabuto had bursted through the door and locked it behind him. He had lost whoever that was chasing him. He looked down the hall and found exactly what he was looking for, his escape route. But if he heard correctly, there were others that were going to be after him. "I have to make this quick," he thought. The paper he had printed was folded and stuffed in his pocket. He breathed heavily, absently making the comparison between the basement and second floor. The basement was cold, and nothing like the second floor. The second floor had orange tile floors and huge stoned cylinder pillars. The basement was plain, with a white tile floor, and steel beams to support the other floors. Kabuto saw another clearing directly ahead. There was an emergency door down the hall, down the endless hallway. But there was a wide-winded steel door at the end, so he had no choice. Fortunately enough for him, it was opened. He quickly, but stealthily dashed by the receptionist, while she was sorting papers. He made it by her and ran forward, toward the exit. The receptionist stood upright, detecting movement. She stepped from behind her desk, looked left, and then right. There was nothing there. She shrugged it off. Then there was more clattering, as though someone was running. She ran over to the emergency exit hallway, but there was nothing there. What in the world? She thought. She sighed, whatever. Kabuto, upon hearing her footsteps, hid in the nearest room, positioning himself on the wall to look back out into the hallway, making sure she had turned back around. Who are you? Kabuto turned to a man that was 3 times his size. He looked the man up and down. He was gigantic. He looked over the man's shoulder, noting 2 other men, neither of them nearly as huge as the one in front of him. They were all loading up on weapons, so it seemed. Oh, Kabuto began. I'm new here, and I was searching for the intruder. That ought to be believable. The man eyed him suspiciously. What's with the mask? Division 7. They heard someone radio in on the walkie-talkie. Wait here, and don't move, the man ordered. He pulled the walkie-talkie from his waist. Division 7, co-captain speaking. This is Division's 5 Commander Kurenai. The intruder is in your perimeter. He was last seen wearing a black ski mask and glasses through the eye sockets. Do you? Kabuto moved to the side when the man's fist came flying at his face, cracks surrounding his fist when it slammed into the wall behind him. The receptionist ran back to the emergency exit hall when she heard a loud bang. Next then she knew someone was thrown from the room on her right and against the wall in the hallway. She gasped and ran back to her desk to make the announcement. Kabuto rose back to his feet with a groan as he held his stomach. The big guy charged him and punched him in the stomach, sending him flying back into the hallway and into the wall. The other 2 continued strapping themselves with weapons. The giant rushed through the doorway, charging at him again. Kabuto moved to the side the second before the man's fist again slammed into the wall. Kabuto ducked when the man spun around with the back of his fist. He spun around him and expertly closed the nerve in his neck with his fingers, causing temporary paralysis. He quickly noted the other 2 men coming through the doorway in his peripheral, and he grabbed the man by his collar, using him as a human shield. The 2 other men each held a 9mm in one hand as they aimed at their partner's paralyzed form. Kabuto's eyes bulged from their sockets. They wouldn't. Then he realized their fingers slightly grazing over the trigger, and swiftly he stripped his human shield of the weapon on his left hip, divesting the weapon from the holster. He too now held a 9mm. He aimed it over his shield's shoulder, darting it back and forth between the 2. Please, I'm not trying to hurt anyone. Just allow me to leave and you both can leave here today with your lives. Before either of them could respond, there was a defiant fire, which caused the 2 men to look down the hall at the perpetrator. Kabuto fired 2 rounds, each embedding into both of their foreheads. Then there was a simultaneous series of sparks flying everywhere, and Kabuto turned his human shield towards the gunfire of Kurenai and Guy's squad. The giant was now completely lifeless as bullets tore through him, and blood splattered haphazardly. They left a horde of smoke as bullets shot through the walls and ceiling. Hold your fire, Kurenai edicts. You and you, she pointed at 2 men that were knelt, their weapons still aimed forward at the culprit. Go see the status of our intruder. They both gave curt nods before crouching over to him. Before they knew it, through the still smoky atmosphere, 2 gunshots rang through the air. Iwashi, Tanbo, get out of there. Kurenai shouted. Then she heard a series of groans, but there weren't any more gunfire. All right, Guy began. Mizuku and Shinobu, come with me. Guy stepped forward, his subordinates towed, their guns locked and loaded. Guy and his subordinates rushed into the cloud of dust, Kurenai waiting impatiently. Again they heard groaning and screaming. The smoke began to clear as metallic clashing against metallic sounded through the air, and gunfire ringing impromptus. The smoke was gone, revealing Guy getting punched in his jaw. He also had blood trailing down his forehead. Guy used his hand to catch himself before he fell and spun his foot around in a leg-swiping motion. Kabuto jumped, aiming his weapon down at him. Kurenai fired a round at him, shooting the gun out of his hand. Guy rolled over to his feet. What are you waiting for? Shot! Guy exclaimed, and their fingers glazed the triggers. No, Kurenai deadpanned. We wait until he moves. She told them. Kabuto kicked Guy while he was down, already killing off his subordinates, Kurenai seeing 2 shuriken protruding from her subordinate's neck and left eyes. She had the right mind to gag, but didn't. Guy kicked him in the ankle, causing him to trip, giving him enough time to get to his feet. Kabuto caught himself and did a back flip, landing to his feet. Get down, Guy, Kurenai ordered. He smirked at Kabuto as he crouched down. Kabuto bent back, kind of like the Matrix. Fire. Then guns were blazing. Kabuto did a backflip, kicking Guy in his chin whilst in his crouching form. A bullet pierced through Guy's right ribcage when he flew in the air. He fell to the ground with a groan as he held his fresh wound, pressuring the blood to stop. The guns were still unloading bullets, while some reload to restart the process over again. Kabuto didn't have his gun anymore, thanks to wasting all the bullets on Guy and pistol whipping him in the forehead. Guy had knocked the gun away and kneed him in stomach, followed with an uppercut. Kabuto quickly recollected his balance and hit Guy in his jaw. Kabuto continued his backflips, getting closer to the exit. Amazingly, no bullets struck him anywhere. As he came closer to the exit, 6 people rushed through the doors on either side, armed with guns, nightsticks, and swords. Some were struck by stray bullets, piercing through their head, shin, necks, and chests. Kabuto stopped his acrobatics. "Halt your fire," Kurenai ordered. She rushed over to Guy. Grabbing her walkie-talkie from her shoulder, she said, "Control room, this is Division's 5 Commander Kurenai requesting an issue for a complete lockdown. And we need a medic." Kabuto dodged an attack from the nightstick, throwing a shuriken at an oncoming swordsman, lodging it within his collarbone. He dropped the sword, falling instantly from the pain wrenching through him. All of the men and women with the guns were killed off by random bullets that pierced through the air from before. Kabuto swiftly knelt down, dodging yet another attack from a second man wielding a nightstick. He grasped the sword on the ground by its handle and held it above his head to deflect the oncoming swordswoman. He did a quick leg swipe, tripping her and one of the men wielding a nightstick, while the other jumped to avoid it. The man in the air came down with a kick. Kabuto rolled over, flipping to his feet. He faced the 3 opponents as the other 2 crawled to rise again. He faced them armed and ready. Then 6 more with nightsticks came bursting through the door. Yamato being one of the 6, and out of breath. They all stood by, awaiting his command. "Who are you?" he asked indignantly. Kabuto gripped the sword tighter. Yamato looked down at his fallen comrade, aching in pain from the shuriken embedded within his collarbone. He clenched his teeth. "Gecko!" He turned to face him. "Kabuto. How dare you?" he growled. Yamato drew his gun from the holster on his hip, aiming at Kabuto. "Kill him, slowly," Yamato drawled, ominously. Next thing Kabuto knew, a shot was fired at him, and 9 officers came rushing towards in. Guy groaned once Kurenai and her subordinates propped him against the wall. "Careful, Kurenai," he groaned. He was still holding his wound, applying pressure until the medics came. "Division 5 Commander Kurenai," a voice radioed in. "This is Control, and lockdown sequence will commence in 1 minute. Kurenai grabbed her walkie-talkie. "Roger that." She turned her attention back to Guy, noting him staring off towards Yamato and his squad. "What is he?" Guy asked. Kurenai looked down the hall, watching as Kabuto did flips off walls, turning expertly in time to slice off his opponent's arm with his sword, and leg swipe them into submission before executing them horridly. He was quick and stealthy, dodging and ducked every attack that came his way, even Yamato's bullets that he'd barely get past without them grazing him. And those star-like things he seemed so fond of that he kept using. "Is he some type of ninja?" he inquired, facing Kurenai. He noticed her clenching her teeth and fist, a full-on glare at the proclaimed ninja. "I don't give a damn what he is. I want him dead," she replied hastily. Facing her comrades, she shouted, "What the hell are you waiting for? Kill him." "But Captain, what about Division's 4 Commander Yamato?" one of her subordinates inquired. "I said kill him, and that means, kill him now." Without hesitation, they unloaded a series of bullets at him. Kabuto had Yamato backed against the wall, already rid of the other threats. He stripped the man of his gun. Yamato was cornered between Kabuto, who was on his right, and the line of fire that blazing infinitely, which was on his left. Kabuto raised the blade in the air, and in a swift thrust of the sword, he was an inch from beheading one of the commanding officers, when a fortunate stray bullet tore through his left bicep that held the sword. He dropped it reflexively. Yamato praised his opportunity as he threw a left hook, hitting him square in the jaw. Kabuto tottered back, jumping further away from the man once he regained his balance. Kabuto made a dash back towards the many guns men. Yamato picked up the sword, chasing after him. Diving into one of the rooms, Kabuto locked it. He backed to the door, he slid down, applying pressure to his wound. He reached into his pouch and fished out another shuriken. He cut his pants leg and wrapped the cloth around his arm, blood soaking through it. He breathed deeply. This was not supposed to have happened. He snorted. Guess I'm getting rusty. He sighed. There was banging from the other side of the door that knocked him from his thoughts. He rose to his feet just in time, right before Yamato thrust the sword into the door where his head was. Okay, I need an escape route, he thought. Looking around, he noted that there were no windows or other doors to escape through. Damn, I picked the wrong room. Lockdown sequence initiated. A computerized voice sounded through the entire building. Lockdown will be completed in approximately 1 minute. Kabuto growled. This isn't going well. He looked up at the ceiling in contemplation, noting the vent overhead. The banging began to become more violent and the door seemed to be giving in. Kabuto threw the shuriken at the vent's cage. It was rusty, explaining why it came down with such ease. Now all he needed was a way up. He looked around a second time. There was a desk, a bookcase and 4 walls. He could make something of it. 4 officers stood outside the door, ramming against it with their shoulders. Each held a held, 2 of which had automatics, while the other 2 had the primitive handgun. Yamato was no longer in sight. He left and went somewhere unknown. The bigger man of the 4 officers slammed his body weight against the door. It gave in immediately afterwards, and the other 3 aimed their guns inside the room. They pointed in every which way, but didn't see him. One of the officers looked up, noting the open vent. She pointed upward, voiceless, signaling that he went up into the ventilation system. They heard feet crawling around at a fast pace and all 4 unloaded their magazines into the vent. They reloaded. Then the vent came falling down with a loud bang. Then they saw a mouse rush out of the opening into the hallway, only to meet its demise as other operatives fire on cue at the sudden movement. What the hell? Where is? Before she could finish her inquiry, the bookcase fell down onto her and another one of the male officers beside her. Kabuto jumped out, 2 of his signature shuriken at hand as he threw them both at the other 2. He took out the woman, as the star-like blade was embedded into the jugular vein in her neck, causing her immediate death. The man however was only struck in the forearm, resulting in him dropping his automatic gun. Kabuto flew towards him, armed with his fist. He punched him the throat when he recollected himself, and the man gagged. Then in a blinding motion, he spun around hitting him with the back of his fist. The man flew into the cobwebbed wall. Kabuto faced the woman with the shuriken in her throat and picked up her gun, aiming it at the man. He fired without a second thought. He then turned around towards the other 2 underneath the bookcase. He perceived that several bones must have been crushed as the instant weight overpowered them in a mere second. He shot them anyways. Dropping the ordinary handgun, he beckoned towards the automatic gun. He picked it up, along with the man that had the shuriken in his forearm and started back out the door. He once again had a human shield, except that this one is inert, unlike the last. He stepped outside the room, only to be met with the blazing glory of gunfire. Most bullets driving into the lifeless body he hid behind. Kabuto peered over the dead man's shoulder, noting the steel beam in the corner far down the hall. He looked behind him, also noting that the wide-winded door was slowly closing its metal door, vertically falling to the ground. He aimed the muzzle of the gun over his shoulder and none expertly. He fired randomly at the steel beam, some bullets hitting it and ricocheting off something else, until it would probably hit one of the gunmen, or shot through a wall or the ceiling. It was a chance he was willing to take. 10 seconds until complete lockdown. The computerized voice warned before counting down. 10, 9, 8. Kabuto clenched his teeth, but nonetheless, riskily threw the body on the floor and made a mad dash towards the exit. Don't let him get away, Kurenai ordered. Guy was getting treatment from about 3 medics, Migaki, Matate, and Mogasa. Gecko was as well after they dragged him back down the hall. That is. Blow him to hell, she yelled over the gunfire. He was almost there when a ricocheting bullet grazed over his masked cheek, slicing the mask off his face as it fell to the ground, but he continued to run. He actually started running faster. 3. He jumped over the bodies from before and slid on his back, catching the door with the gun, delaying it as he squirmed to the other side. He was for certain that this hall was empty, which it was, and he continued to run until he was faced with yet another door. He opened it, revealing a forestry area. Oddly enough, he recognized where he was, and began to haul ass north. Lockdown initiation sequence completed. Halt fire. Kurenai ordered. She squinted through the cloud of smoke that developed from, yet again shooting the ceiling and walls. Is he dead? One of Guy's subordinates asked. Then abruptly, Kurenai growled and roared. No, he's not dead. He escaped, you dumb fuck. She roared on. Damn it, he was one man against all of us and we still lost. You're fucking horrible, the lot of you. I've got the right mind to send you all back to the training academy because that performance was fucking weak. What happened here? Asuma decided to ask once he appeared. Kamaru by his side. And where the hell were you two? She inquired, truculently. You didn't hear all the gunfire, or the screams, or loud-ass banging that was going on? Did you not hear me when I said there was an intruder alert? Sadly, I'm going to have to say I didn't hear a thing. I was in Kamaru's office, and you know he has soundless glass, he said. And you know for what reason he opted to whisper next. And I think I left my radio back at my office so I didn't hear a thing. And what's your excuse? She growled. I was in my office and I believe my radio was turned off. Or the batteries went dead, I'm not for certain. Kamaru explained. Did you at least apprehend whoever it was? Do you think I would be this upset if we had? She shouted. Kurenai. Guy groaned as the medics worked on wrapping his wounds with gauzes to stop the bleeding. They would later extract the bullet. Settle down, Yamato has it under control. Yamato? She inquired. She scanned the area, but he was nowhere in sight. Where is he? She asked. Outside the... He paused as he tried to lift himself with the help of the medics. Building. He went out there after the first lockdown warning. He gathers search hounds in case he did manage to escape. He also has a few of his own subordinates, or at least what's left of them. What do you mean what's left of them? Kamaru asked, and pointed his chin down the hall, where Kamaru and Asuma stared in shock. There had to be about 20 dead bodies scattered over the floor, and the amount of blood was sickening. There was about 12 ounces of it, not including that splattered over the walls. Wait, Asuma began. One man, Guy added. One man did all this. Asuma completed, and Kurenai gave a tightened nod. The muscles in her neck did not want to do that, but, whatever. That's impossible. It's possible because it happened. Guy clarified. He was like a ninja, the way he was moving and striking them down. He was no ordinary intruder, he's had practice. He's a trained assassin. Who gives a damn what he is? Kurenai exploded. I just want him dead. I do. Kamaru added. But it's not what he is, it's who he is that I care about. And something tells me it's linked to the Sound Village, and possibly, Orochimaru. He thought, subconsciously glaring at the wall. Kamaru began down the hall, searching for any trace of DNA. He could take a blood sample, he was sure that they, at the most part, wounded him, but with the amount of blood that's here, it would take a while. Asuma was towed. What are you looking for? Asuma inquired. DNA sample, was Kamaru's short answer. Walking past who he believed to be one of Kurenai's subordinates, he almost vomited as he seen the shuriken protruded from their left eyes and necks. Could there be DNA fingerprints on this? He asked. Asuma shrugged. Perhaps, but we could try it. Kamaru nodded as he pulled them from their vulgar, bloodied bodies. They pressed on, not exactly wanting to see the rest of the damage done. They stopped by a door further down the hall, and looked inside the room, noting a fallen vent with multiple bullet holes. He also saw 2 officers suffocating under a huge bookcase, and other woman motionless due to yet another shuriken that was embedded within her jugular vein. I wonder how this happened, Asuma said, turning back towards the door ready to exit when he saw another man slumped against the wall, a bullet hole in his forehead, and a shuriken in his forearm. Damn, let's move on, Kamaru suggested. They continued down the hall, only stopping when they saw a man without his head, and a woman without either arm or leg. One of each was dismembered from her body. Another man had his foot in front of him while on his stomach, a narrow slit through his back. There were bloodied nightsticks and swords and guns lying everywhere. Ah, Asuma winced. What happened? Kamaru asked alert. Asuma pulled something from his foot. It was black and metal. What the hell is this? Kamaru stared at it thoughtfully before answering, Makibishi. He looked down at the floor, noting that there were more. It's a spike that helps those being chased. It is indeed, from what I've read, in the ninja art of assassination. But I wouldn't be too certain. So we're actually dealing with a ninja? Asuma inquired incredulously. Perhaps, but that's a long-reach possibility. Seeing as though I was not here, I can't be too sure," he replied, taking heed to a dark piece of material slightly further down the hall. He sauntered towards it, making sure not to step on any of those spiky things. He picked it up. "A mask. Whatcha got there?" Asuma inquired, wincing meagerly as he stood on his injured foot. Kamaru turned to face the man. "A mask," he answered. "He was wearing that," Kurenai clarified, stepping up behind the two, speculating her footing to not step on the spiky things. "HMN," Kamaru responded. "I'll take it back to the lab," Asuma began. "It's sure to have some hair follicles inhabiting between it somewhere." He took the mask from him. "And it's a better subject than these," he added, lifting the shuriken. He was off, taking the evidence back to the lab. "So what are we to do now?" Kurenai inquired. "All we can do is hope Yamato can catch whoever had the guts to break in and the skills to make it out, alive," he suggested. Kurenai gave another agitated nod, as she remembered the masked ninja. "In the meantime, I'll send out a request to unlock all the doors, and report that the lockdown sequence was a failure," she said, grabbing the walkie-talkie. Kamaru gave a distant nod. He heard the words spewing from her orifice, but he didn't find them coherent. His attention was concentrated on the heavy piece of metal that was crushed into pieces under the steel wide-winded door. "A gun? How'd they get there?" he thought, but could only imagine. He walked over and picked up the shattered magazine case. "One. Yes, we are dealing with an expert." He tossed it on the ground, abruptly marching back to Guy. "Get me the results of the DNA sample from that mask ASAP," he barked, storming past Kurenai. "Wait a minute," Kurenai shouted out. Kamaru stopped, looking in the corner of his eye. "I'm a Division 5 commander, and you're Division 12. I'm not under your command anymore, Kamaru. I'm sorry, but I've just moved up in the industry, and you've fallen behind," she pursued, stalking past him. "Get me the results as soon as you can, and I'll take it from there," she finished, and sauntered off without another word. Kamaru clenched his teeth. As much as he wanted to protest, he couldn't. She was right after all. She was ranked at a more specialized level than he was. It was the kidnap case that he couldn't figure out. "I've spent 14 years on this case. This one case, and this one case alone, and I'm not about to quit. Either way, I will get those results." He unclenched his teeth, taking one last look at the massacre before storming off. Kabuto heard the dogs barking, and he could hear them getting closer. He scanned his surrounding area, immediately taking shelter atop a tree. He dug his nails into the bark of the tree, clawing his way to settle upon one of its branches. It was hard seeing as though his other arm could barely move, but he managed. He didn't have his mask on anymore. "I have to be extremely cautious so that nothing like before happens again." He heard the hounds approaching, barking and sniffing around bushes, somehow tracking his scent. "How do they even know my scent?" he thought as he crouched behind the many tree branches protruding from the tree. Through a slit between two branches, he noted a man with one dog as it hauled him along in the direction of the tree Kabuto was hidden in. He saw the dog stop and sniff one of the makibishi he had dropped on the ground earlier on. He looked down at his hands. They were bleeding. "Blood. My blood. They're tracking me by my blood. I must have cut myself on them when I threw them out. That was not a clever move on my part," he mentally growled. He looked off to his left, noting yet another man with another dog. "Shit, this isn't good." He clenched his teeth. "I have to take them out now." He fished into his pouch. It was almost empty. 4 left. He pushed the branches aside, with just enough space to move his arms. The dog stopped in front of him, stopped again, and he looked to his left. The dog was still coming his way. He threw the shuriken at the man in front of him, pinpointing it directly above his right eye. It sliced through his head like butter, and he fell instantly. The dog turned to its master, sniffing his dead body. Kabuto threw another shuriken, aiming for the back of the dog's head. It jumped out the way, staring up into the tree, and began its horrendous barking. It bore its teeth, growling under its breath. The dog sensed that was coming? He thought skeptically. Animal instinct, I suppose. But it won't happen again. Kabuto maneuvered over to his right, escaping the sight of the man on his left. He threw his third shuriken into another tree, causing the dog below to turn and face the attack. Then in an instant, he rid himself of his fourth shuriken, embedding it within the dog's spine. It was paralyzed, and unable to make sound. He smirked to himself. Didn't see that coming? He thought, pushing his glass onto his face. He turned to the other man as he got closer. Shit, I'm not going to be able to make it. Unless, he whispered to himself. He took off his glasses and popped out one of the lens. Hopefully I can get another pair. He pressed the dull piece of glass against the skin on his forearm. Pressing harder, he slowly dragged it across his arm, blood rushing out of the freshly penetrated skin and down his forearm and onto the lens. He threw the blood onto lens on the tree and onto the dog below. Then he gathered more of it onto the lens and tossed it as far as he could without being detected. That should hold them off for a while. He curled his fist and more blood rushed from his veins. Okay, I have to move. He rose from his crouching position to stand up. Inching his way around the tree branch, he came across another tree branch that was close enough to jump on that lead onto a different tree. He took the risk and jumped for it, wobbling slightly after the landing, but soon caught himself. He saw another tree branch that seemed the same as the other and, again, he took the risk and jumped for it, this time landing perfectly on his feet. He smirked at his triumph and continued to sidestep and hop from tree to tree until he eventually got the hang of it. I can see a clearing just up ahead. He looked down to the ground at a dog that stopped and sniffed the air. At first it turned towards his direction, but decided against it after smelling the same blood elsewhere. I guess my little trick worked. He jumped onto another tree and continued the process. The dogs were confused at where he was. They didn't know if he was in the tree where they smelt his blood or over in the area of the deceased dog and his master, where they also smelt his blood. But it didn't stop Kabuto. He progressed with his mission to get back home. He reached the clearing and jumped for another tree branch. He missed it, but caught it with his uninjured arm and swung forward, landing onto his feet with a slight oomph. He turned around, a sudden smirk adorned his features. I guess I lost them. And you were so close to. He sighed and shrugged. Oh well, you'll just have to try harder next time, he chuckled. Farewell. Then he was off, a clear path towards sound.
That's all for now. If you enjoy this video, then please like, share and do comments.